Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach, live City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor, City Hall. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we'll call roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Lagree.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski. Absent. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
And Commissioner Ed Chernowski. Here. Mayor Stan Mills is here. We have a full complement of the mayor commissioners and therefore are able to formally conduct business today. Also like to identify the staff. It takes many people to put these meetings on. And we're welcoming of our staff for participating. City Secretary Ann Womack over here. If everybody would raise your hand real quick. On my left is City Manager Lawrence Christian. On my right is City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis, Police Chief Keith Banks, Margaret Carson, Executive Secretary in the back. All the way in the back corner is Kevin Williams, Public Works Supervisor. I can't remember this officer's name, so we'll let him introduce himself in a little bit. I'm sorry, I've seen your moment. And Judge, she could introduce herself in a minute. So we're glad everybody's here. I want to thank everybody that is here in person. As you know, if you've been here, that during certain times of the meeting, we ask for feedback from members of the public. And if so, we will call on you to come up to one of the microphones, identify yourself and your relationship to the city, and give your comment. Also want to thank everybody that's watching virtually and remind everybody that support documents, those are documents that support our agenda topics. When they're available sufficient time ahead of the meeting, they are embedded into the agenda. Go to cityofrehoboth.com. Look in the portal in the lime green box in the home page, center right side. Look up the date of the meeting and you'll be able to see the same information that we are working from up here. With that, I'd like to recognize that we did have a death this weekend, a drowning, and would like to offer that family a short moment of silence, please. Thank you. And on to something a little happier, much happier. We're a presentation of a proclamation recognizing Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Vice President Gossett will join me. And we also have two members representing the Ovarian Cancer Society. Joan Gilmore, raise your hand. Jan, I'm sorry, Jan. You're going to be between us and Donna Verner. Very good. And to save my voice, I'm going to let Vice President read the proclamation. Thank you very much.
Good morning. The proclamation for Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, September 2023. Whereas ovarian cancer is the deadliest of female reproductive systems cancers, and whereas the American Cancer Society estimates that in 2023, approximately 19,170 women will be newly diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and whereas in 2023, it is estimated that approximately 13,270 women will die in the United States from ovarian cancer. Many women are not diagnosed until the disease has begun to spread. But if the disease is detected in its earliest state, stage 1, the 5-year survival rate is more than 92%. The symptoms of ovarian cancer are often subtle and easily confused with other ailments. And whereas approximately 50% of new cases of ovarian cancer are diagnosed in women over 63 years of age, women between 25 and 54 years of age account for approximately 25% of the cases. And whereas 1 in 78 women will be diagnosed with ovarian cancer during their lifetime, and whereas during Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, we honor the loved ones we have lost to this disease and all those who battle it today. And we continue our work to improve care and raise awareness about ovarian cancer. And whereas that it is why it is important for all women to pay attention to their bodies and know what is normal for them. Women who experience unplanned changes, including abdominal pain, pressure, and swelling, should talk to their healthcare providers. And whereas ovarian cancer and the hardship it brings have affected too many lives. This September, we stand with everyone who has been touched by the disease, and we recognize all those committed to advancing the fight against the cancer through research, advocacy, and quality care. And now, therefore, we, Mayor Stan Mills and Board Vice President Patrick Gossett, do hereby proclaim September 2023 as Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Together, let us renew our commitment to reducing the impact of ovarian cancer and to a future free from cancer in all forms. Proclaim this 5th day of September 2023.
Here's a little photo session here, of course. You got two politicians here. We're very proud to be doing this, and it's even more joyous occasion because we understand you are two ovarian cancer survivors. So
We are, yes.
congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We have this additional. Commissioner Jay Lagree, would you please come front and center, please? Some of you may know, some of you may not know, this is Commissioner Jay Lagree. Jay Lagree's last formal meeting here, I believe. And so we wanted to recognize him. We made this beautiful glass plaque. We're going to send home with you, and it reads, "In celebration of Commissioner Jay Lagree, in recognition of your passionate service to the city of Rehoboth Beach as a city commissioner, in 2017 to 18 and 2020 to 2023, and as chairperson and member of several committees, presented by the city of Rehoboth Beach, September 5th, 2023.
You need to know that I'm only changing places from that seat to that seat next to Walter. So it won't be long. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
With that, our next item of business is the swearing in of Patrolman Marie Fuller. This is the first time we've ever done this publicly, as far as I know. So we're going to turn it over to Officer Will Sullivan and/or Chief Banks.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioner, City Manager, and the general public. Thank you for allowing us to be here this morning. First of all, let me just say congratulations to Commissioner Jay Lagree on his somewhat retirement or whatever, but seriously, I would just want to say thank you for all the support you've given to the police department and to our community over the years. And I consider you a friend, and I appreciate all you've done for us. So thank you. So please do not be a stranger, and it doesn't sound like you will be since you're going to be in the back row with Mr. Brittingham. You know, it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome Patrolman Marie Fuller to the Rehoboth Beach Police Department. She just graduated last Thursday. She attended Delaware State Police Academy for 23 weeks. She was in there, so she's ready to get out and to do some more training for another, 8 or 12 weeks, Will? 9 weeks for field training and all, and before she can be out on her own. But we've known Fuller for a couple years already. She's done 2 summers with us, so she's been top-notch officer. She's been on top of teaching and helping us recruit other officers to come into the summer program. So, as I said, it's a distinct pleasure to have her with us, and she's actually brought her family with her today for the swearing in, so that's another special occasion. I'll let her introduce them in a little bit. But at this time, I guess I'll turn over to Judge Bennett.
I, and state your full name,
I, Marie Catherine Fuller,
do voluntarily enter into service
do voluntarily enter into service
with the Rehoboth Beach Police Department
with the Rehoboth Beach Police Department
as a police officer
as a police officer
on this,
the
5th day
fifth day
of September
of September
in the year 2023.
in the year 2023.
I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that as long
that as long
as I am employed
as I am employed
by the Rehoboth Beach Police Department,
by the Rehoboth Beach Police Department,
I will bear true faith
I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States of America,
to the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
and the Charter of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
and the Charter of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
I promise to faithfully
I promise to faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties
all the duties
incumbent on me
incumbent on me
as a police officer
as a police officer
of the City of Rehoboth Beach,
of the City of Rehoboth Beach,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Like a little photo session with you and Officer Sullivan. Sullivan. We're gonna do a little photo session here. Judge, you too, you too. We're gonna do this photo and then we're gonna get your folks up. All righty, let's get your family up. You got James, Jim, and Ruth coming to join. They're gonna stand there. Turn around for a second. Look at all these gizmos. It probably takes a week just to learn what each of these things are, to be able to grab the right thing at the right moment. Come on in here. Get us all in. Congratulations, welcome aboard. With that, we're going to go to the next item of business, which is correspondence, and no correspondence has been received prior to this meeting. With that, we're going to go to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. If we can go up to that, the PowerPoint presentation. Several weeks ago, commissioners asked for an update on communications toolbox, and what I've asked to do is our communications manager, Lynn Cohn, who is not here. She's at a communications conference down in Orlando, Florida, and she coordinated with Chief of Police Keith Banks to put together a primary notification tool secondary, additional communications methods, and just bear your indulgence while we bring that up onto the screen.
Hold on a second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. If we could move on to the next slide. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to go over the quick communications toolbox as we talk about primary emergency notification tools. As you can see, the primary ones we utilize mostly, definitely local regional media outlets. These are conducted in your personal interviews, via press releases. Communications Manager Lynn Cohn uses a variety of different social media platforms. As you can see with Facebook, we have over 14,000 followers, over 10,000 on the police department page. Instagram has also a healthy following. Twitter, now X, has about the medium following, about 1,500. And our newest platform, LinkedIn, we are still building that platform. We have just shy of 100 followers. These are easily notification tools where we want to get a message out very quickly. They're not the primary emergency, but they can be used in that capacity. We also have over 6,400 followers in our Lines in the Sand. That is a rather robust. We can use that one to communicate on a normal basis. That would be something along the lines of if there was bad weather or things that were approaching that we had time to draft something and distribute those. We also have the emergency, as you can see, beacon text email alerts through our Nixle Everbridge. That's a healthy subscription with over 2,000 subscribers, plus an additional almost 1,400 phone contacts. What that means is we can contact different subscribers and different residents throughout the city of Rehoboth Beach and adjoining areas immediately via phone and text alerts. The police, and only the police, have a specific notification tool. It's what we call a geographic reverse 911. That is only through the police, and that's through usage only by the Department of Emergency Management Association. So if there was inclement weather, really imperative notification tools, Chief could contact the Department of Emergency Management, put what's known as a geofence right around Rehoboth Beach, gives it parameters, and he can blast out emergency notification techniques, such as if there was a hurricane, if there's impending fire, things of those really, really important notifications. Again, that is very limited, that is very scripted, and it is very provided only to the emergency management sources. Moving down, we are looking to provide a new website. That new website will have notifications right there on the front of the website. What they call them alert beacons. You may see some websites on there that has this red dot right there on the main. You click that one and it gives you immediate notifications, and everything is linked basically to your website. That's where most communities are moving toward, and the website of the city, the community, becomes the launching pad and the landing zone for all information. So you would launch that out via social media, via news, everything you would, and all connections will come back to that one for updates. So it makes it much easier on a small communications department to manage those updates. So that's where we're going with the website update. Also, direct communication. Our communications manager, Lynn Cohn, has a variety of email notifications. There's over 7 homeowners association. Obviously, our Chamber of Commerce, Rehoboth Beach Main Street, Camp Rehoboth, and Senior Center, plus other strategic partners that we use to help communicate messages across the city of Rehoboth Beach. Within the police department itself, there are 2 certified public information officers. And that right there is our primary communication tools that are readily available to both the communications manager, all the leadership of the Rehoboth Beach, the police department, and other entities. Moving on to the next page, Mayor. These are what I would consider the secondary notification tools. As you can see, we've got our marquee that goes down Rehoboth Avenue. We got directed communication with those impacted agencies, such as where we're communicating with, we've got local media to contact, we've got the volunteer fire company, specific businesses, we can go with other agencies, we've got contact information that we can go right directly or en masse. We've used press conferences with great success in the past. We have, the police department has a variety of electronic road signs that can be placed at strategic locations. You might have seen those coming in, such as when the President of the United States is locally, when FAA puts the no-fly zone over the area, so we can't fly drones. That's another way to communicate immediately to residents, visitors, businesses. We've used door hangers and knocking on doors with our residents to great success. There is a Smart 911 citizen registration. So Sussex County has a specific entity called Smart 911. A resident can subscribe to that one, put specific information such as medication, animals, certain medical conditions. You can upload that one, tag it to your address. So when you have an emergency situation, that information comes up readily, so the first responders can be that much more prepared as they arrive to your residence. And again, we also use signage placed around neighborhoods and around town with also great success. And finally, next page. And here's where we consider routine communications methods. As you can see, I didn't update this slide. Reach Out Rehoboth is the new platform that we just launched, I think a little over 10 days ago. That number is wrong. We are over 1,000 registered users, and I'll give you an update at the very last slide. We've used direct mail right to residents. That has really helped out cut down on the number of questions and confusion. I think Kevin used the last one not too long ago when we were talking about paving on Laurel Avenue, very easily. It answered a lot of questions. It helped residents get those answers. It also communicate right back to the Public Works Director if there were any miscommunication or misunderstanding. And then routine run-of-the-mill advertising. And next. Now, throughout our communications methodologies, whether that's immediate communication or just routine, we try to use specific strategies regarding communications. And we'll post that one with frequent meetings among the city's response team internally. We have the volunteer fire company chief that works for the city. We got our own chief of police right here. Specific partners will bring in, I think one of the most recent ones that I was a part of was the 4th of July. And we had leadership from both internal and external with, I believe, 170 partners all around Sussex County, whether it's the county, state, and that has large-scale briefings in the convention center. I think that was done beautifully. I think that the next one we got going on, I believe, is September 21st. And that's going to be for Sea Witch. That's going to be a tabletop exercise. Again, we'll bring multiple partners in, rehearse the exercise, conduct different wargaming techniques, and make sure that all of our partners understand what's going on. We do communications with elected officials. I try to do that one on a weekly basis to make sure they're aware of what's going on across the depth and the breadth of the city. Consistency of messaging. This ties in with training messaging to all city staff. A lot of times, the front-end staff are the ones receiving the phone calls. So what we like to do is we'll be talking points, and they will be provided to the front-end staff so that consistency of messaging and talking points are delivered both at the front end and of every echelon of leadership, so everybody speaks with one voice. That allows us to communicate the right message at the right time across the entirety of our population. And sometimes you just want to say hi to your residents. And so we'll do that one via social media just to make sure that they understand we're still out there. I think Lynn had another post just right before she went on to this conference. So just trying to make sure that we stay up to date and make sure that communications methodology is done consistently, accurately across the entire spectrum of communications tools that we have. And finally, the last page, just wanted to give a quick update. As of last night, we have 1,044 active participants on Reach Out Rehoboth in the last 10 days. As you can see on the pie chart, it is almost equally distributed about whether they are local residents or they are outside of the 1.2 square miles of the city of Rehoboth Beach. So that is a good split right there. We do believe, based off of the questions that we put on, the map that we put up, that we are getting an accurate representation of those who are living in the city and those who are not living in the city. Most people have been very honest and clicked on that one. We've gotten praise from both the Granicus, which is the Engagement HQ platform moderator, saying our questions are probably the most complex they've seen to make sure that we are getting an accurate representation of our residents. And as you can see, the Hot Topics is probably the number one contributor with over 2,000 contributions. And then you have different questions and comments on the various pages that you can see. Wilmington, Baltimore Streetscape has the next one. The traffic and parking map. The residents are doing great. They're dropping maps and, pins on the map where they believe there is a parking or traffic congestion or issues with recommendations. So that engagement is going well. We'll provide that one to the commissioners here in probably about the next 10 days to 2 weeks. And you see the other ones, the streetscape questions, stormwater utility, beach patrol, and just shared stories. We believe this helps the engagement with both our residents and our city staff stay consistent and also intact. So pending any questions, Mayor and Commissioners?
Is this document available?
It will be embedded. I just wanted to make sure it was completely updated, so I got the last update last night from Lynn at,
Okay,
I think it was like 9 o'clock. So I'm going to give this to Ann, and she will.
Just let us know where it is.
Yes, it will be on the embedded pub by the end of the day today.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
City Manager? I know with any launch of any type of digital platform, we're going to have some challenges and little tweaks and things that need to be done. But overall, I wanted to give a shout out for the selection of the hot topic of dogs in general, beach and boardwalk, because the goal is really to build our audience. It is to get as many people to register so we can interact with them as we possibly can. And I think it's clear by the numbers that the selection of that topic actually facilitated the goal of getting the registration. And since this survey, I know there was some consternation a little bit about who's signing up and the split that we'll be able to see, and I have every confidence that over time we'll be able to finesse this even more than we have thus far, since we've only been launched, as you say, since August 25th. But it certainly got people's attention. It certainly got their comments and their initiative to register so they can stay involved with the city. So congratulations on the selection of that particular topic.
I can take no credit. That was strictly Lynn. She thought that was going to be a wonderful opportunity for people to engage and stay engaged with their city. So we enjoyed it. We're going to continue looking at those high-profile questions to really help people understand what we're trying to get across.
Well, and I also wanted to mention that, with that compliment comes, I think, the clarification that when we do surveys on any kind of topic, the survey is not necessarily going to be the direction that the commissioners are going to take. It is to inform us of different opinions, different ideas, so that we can consider that as we decide what's best for the city of Rehoboth. So I don't want folks to get the wrong impression that just because there's a survey out there, that it's the only thing that we'll consider. It won't be, and it will be a part of our decision-making process. So I'm very excited that this launch has taken place and that we'll even get our numbers increasing as we go along. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you very much. Thank you, Lawrence. Is there anything else?
Nothing, I have nothing further, Mayor.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which is City Solicitor's Report.
Thank you, Mayor, and I don't have anything new to report for this workshop meeting.
All right, and no committee reports were identified. Does anybody want to insert anything? If not, we'll move on to old business, of which there is none. So we'll move on to new business. Presentation by Wallace Montgomery, that is our planner, subcontracted planning company. Presentation by Wallace Montgomery on research pertaining to Section 270-35D relating to the minimum number of parking spaces required for certain uses. If you recall, Jay, you may need to help me a little bit, but a brief summary of this is back during the clear space days, there was some questioning about the possible ambiguity of some of the parking code, and we asked that to be looked at. Recently, we sent it to the Planning Commission, and then they sent it back to us, and we did make some minor changes to the parking code with the recognition that there was still more work to do. And so we handed it over to the city manager. City manager then tasked Wallace Montgomery with doing additional research. Can you, Lawrence, are you able to articulate exactly the directions that you gave to Wallace Montgomery so that we can then hear from them on their approach?
Yes, Mayor. If you could probably click up on the attachment, you'll see. So it's small.
How good-
It's-
how good
what-
your eye-
Basically, what we had was a small table based that was initially provided to the Board of Commissioners, and it had, I believe, it was 9 uses on there, or 9 aspects of it, and it really didn't identify the depth of what was being looked at. When we met with Wallace Montgomery, we asked them to look at every potential use within the code, look at what the rationale behind each one of their recommendations, and also provide a recommendation we can actually have a discussion at the workshop. So there was a lot of staff meetings associated with this when we looked at every single one of those uses across the entire zoning code. Yeah, and we provided that to Wallace Montgomery, who did a lot of the legwork that you see before you right now. So again, there's a review of the entire zoning code, what the applicable use is, and we tried to stay within our approved uses definitions, and where there's not, there's also a rationale on the, I believe on the far right hand.
Yep.
Yeah. And with that, if you don't have any questions, I'll turn it over to.
No, that's fine, and I think we need to understand that this is our introductory discussion on this, and that we might have to have Nick come back to the next meeting to further answer some questions after we've cogitated a little more on that. So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, all commissioners. I appreciate your time and attention to this. So as Mr. Christian was explaining, Wallace Montgomery was tasked with identifying all of the different uses that are mentioned or called out explicitly in the text of the zoning code. And so we're not just looking at the table of approved uses. We're not looking at, the big picture. We're getting into the minutia of the language that says, look, there are potential for uses like a hotel, motel, or inn, a craft distillery. All of these different things are mentioned throughout in some place in the code. So we pulled all of those mentions into this table and then went through, tried to find a definition of that use within your code. If not within your code, then within some generally accepted planning documents we used as additional reference where it wasn't explicitly defined here. We then looked at what category of zoning they are or are not permitted in, and that's if you see in the top row on the green, your R1, R2, C1, et cetera. Those are your various zoning classes. And the yes, no, et cetera, indicates whether they are a standard permitted use within that class. But if we go over to the far right is where I'd sort of like to focus our attention. And in hindsight, I wish I had provided you guys a sort of different format with a deliverable that was a little bit easier. I had sort of intended to walk you through my spreadsheet here because it allows me to sort of rearrange things and show you some of the consistencies that we tried to maintain. But I misunderstood and we got a PDF, so we're going to work with it. So going through here, one of the first things that we tried to say is in column N, which is it in the existing use table? So is it an existing use explicitly that we have here before us? Then we go into the next column there. Is it in the existing parking table? Is it an explicit use in that parking table? The next column to the right, there is a suggested category. For a lot of these, they are, yeah, if you see yes expressly in the column in parking table, that means that that use is expressly called out in the parking table already. If it says yes inferred, that indicates that by inference, the use type is included with another category and can be considered covered already as it has a parking ratio assigned to it. For an example, community-related offices is a use. This is line 7. But it's not explicitly expressly contained within the parking table. So we consider that an inferred use because you look and you see that there's the suggested parking category of office buildings or bank, and public buildings, private clubs, and institutions. Well, community-related offices falls pretty closely within office building, bank, public buildings, etc. So our inference is that we can take that existing parking standard and apply it to community-related offices and similar uses where they were not explicitly defined before. Is everybody with me so far? Am I making sense in the concept?
So far.
Okay, so far so good.
Any questions?
Yeah, I've just, Nick, thank you for this. In the inferred, though, that is interpreted by a staff member as opposed to expressly defined within the written code. Is that correct?
So the inference is made by me. Myself and Lauren would have, the other planning
But in a practical application for our city staff, that same assumption or inference would be made by that staff member as opposed to expressly written material within the code.
Correct. So these are suggestions for you to consider. These are things that may come up in the future that there will be, at least having a record of guidance on this topic may help your staff to make those determinations if in the absence of more specific parking regulations.
If I may ask a global question, you're familiar with other codes of other municipalities, I'm sure. Are these inferences, definitions also existent in other codes throughout the country?
Absolutely. No parking code is 100%. There's always going to be you're either playing catch up to new classifications like mixed-use zonings, or there are new types of buildings that nobody ever considered. Data centers. Most people don't have parking requirements for data centers right now. That's a huge growth industry right now in the land use section. So how would we deal with those? Well, I don't want to get too far afield. It's not a mentioned use at all. The code is silent on it, so we did not bring it into this consideration, if that makes sense.
And from a professional planner standpoint, is sort of cart before the horse in the sense, is the use defined and then the parking equated to that, or vice versa, if parking standards attached to a use? Which comes first if you're going to say data service or that you just mentioned?
So which would come first, the use or the parking standard? The use typically, although if you're going to introduce a new use into your code, I would recommend that it be done in a comprehensive fashion so that you address parking at the same time.
Great.
So that you don't have an orphaned use, essentially.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, you'll,
Let me
sorry.
interject here. This may be a legal question, Glenn, but the way I'm hearing the difference between expressly and inferred, the way I'm interpreting it is that inferred may not be a good thing. That if that allows for ambiguity, or it allows for building and licensing to have to make a decision and interpret it, then is that really identifying items that need to be clarified?
So this, I think, is an interesting exercise that they've gone through. So the table in the code says, it lists several different things that are the explicitly listed uses that have a parking category or parking criteria that go along with them. Inferred means, and I thought this part was interesting, that Nick and Lauren went through the code and they found all of the uses that are referenced within the code, but not explicitly on the table. And they said, we want to address those as well. So they show up in the table as uses that aren't on the parking table, but we mention them in the city code someplace. So what they've done then is said, since these uses are mentioned, we should try to figure out what parking criteria would apply to them. That's the inferred, what, some of them are easy. I mean, you would think a t-shirt shop easily falls within a retail category. But he's saying, look, but it's not explicitly stated in the code that a t-shirt shop is a retail.
Right.
And therefore, should you all as commissioners take the time and effort to try to list every use very explicitly and very explicitly give them a parking criteria? Or are you comfortable inferring some of these uses that are mentioned in the code and allowing that within the building official's office?
Large category.
Right.
Can you take it one step further? Would it be logical that in the inferred sense, there would be standard business practices that are well documented and available for staff reference in building and licensing?
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, I think part of this exercise, you could end up having sort of a policy guide.
Yeah.
Well, it would be like a
document.
how-to.
Yeah.
I mean, I
exactly,
don't
exactly.
understand how a new employee coming in, if you have a great deal of inferred,
Right,
how do they know what our practices have been?
right.
Just wing it? What do we do? I mean, what do we do now? Are we winging it?
I would say, as Nick says, if a data center comes in that we've never seen before, we're probably winging it because, yeah.
But you could almost anticipate what could come in that we don't currently have addressed.
Right.
Okay.
And when we say wing it, there's not someone over there freewheeling right now in the building and licensing.
Thank you for the clarification.
Right.
It's an informed winging.
Right.
With lots of staff work, we even bring the solicitor on board to make sure that the interpretations are correct. But agreed, how-to manuals, operations manuals, those are the way you should be doing.
Okay.
And generally, this type of policy formula can help to support your staff's policy papers, however you guys choose to implement this type of information.
So is it fair to say, City Manager, that our staff policies need to be tightened up a bit?
I would say yes. I think we started with that particular process when we brought Wallace Montgomery on board to do the 236 Article VII. So that was going to be in large respect the base that we were going to build off of.
Yeah, I'm just trying to connect all the dots of how this is being approached for the future.
And
Thank you.
possibly a further dot, and as this moves forward, how do we use past experience, or not precedent necessarily, but existing cases that the inference has been applied so that it becomes standard, if you will, in the sense that these situations have existed in either residential or commercial establishments that building and licensing has applied this parking minimum standards to, that we can then say, all right, here is evidence of this is how it's been applied in the past. Right or wrong, this is a data fact, a data point that we could use moving forward. I don't know if that's going to be part of moving forward or not.
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's all instructive for sure, what's been done previously, but I don't know that there's been an effort to kind of, yeah.
No, not yet, but I think that's a point very well taken, because looking for consistency in application is going to be a crux in this entire thing.
Thank you.
Now, and I should also mention too that our goal in going through these uses is not to recreate your parking standards. We're not trying to solve any parking problems with this exercise. We're simply trying to find what uses do we have a good parking ratio for? I'm sorry, not even trying to say whether it's good or bad. Do we have a parking ratio for it, yes or no? And if not, what can we use for it? Do we have something in the standards, like a category already that we can slot that use within? If not, then that's where I found that I had to make up a couple categories to put things in, because there just wasn't a good fit with a couple of potential uses. And to give you an example of that, let me find enclosed places of amusement and places of amusement. I went back and forth on this and ended up creating a active recreational category, because you could also use that for your commercial tennis courts, gymnasiums or health clubs, theaters and halls for the entertainment of guests, and so forth. In the table, on the right-hand side there, so if you slide over. And let's see, I think go down a little bit more. Oop. I'm sorry, maybe up a little bit more. I lied, go down.
What number is it?
It was my line 20.
What category on the left side?
I'm looking at senior center, billiards or pool establishments, theaters and halls for entertainment of guests. I think there we go, there it is, right there.
Oh, right here.
Yep, so if you go ahead and slide to the right on those guys.
So we're looking at the bottom two column rows.
Well, actually, all of these rows I proposed for active recreational class. Okay, and so anywhere you see an asterisk in that suggested category, that's to indicate that it is a newly proposed classification, because I simply couldn't slot it logically or illogically with something else. It just defied categorization based on what was in there already. And so for the active recreational areas, you'll see that the second to last column there is, if the total cumulative square footage proposed is less than 10,000, then no parking is required. If the cumulative square footage is greater than 10,000, then one spot for each 400 square foot of gross floor area, exclusive of underground parking, et cetera. That is consistent with some of the recreational parking ratios that we found in the ITE journals. What does ITE stand for? Oh gosh. It's basically the engineer's journal for parking. We use it quite a bit, but I can't remember the stupid name. So, and this also sort of reflects the fact that in Rehoboth, you don't have a ton of room for parking lots of massive size. You don't have a ton of room for super large active recreational facilities. We didn't want to create situations where you can't construct the use because of the excessive parking requirements. Excessive is a descriptor, but you know, you can argue what is and is not excessive all day. This, honestly, it sounded reasonable. It was consistent with some of your previous parking standards, and so we said it's a good place to start. Now, please keep in mind that these are simply suggestions. It's up to the commissioners to make the determination as to, is that too much, not enough? Is it, Nick, are you overreaching here? You know, are you crazy? We don't even have a need for these classifications. You know, that is all for debate, but we offer this as a starting point for a discussion. Excuse me 1 second. I don't want to necessarily go through every single use on this chart because I would quickly bore everybody to death. So my thought is to go to some of the more interesting ones, if you will, or ones that might be a little bit more of interest with things that are currently going on. Restaurants, I'll say real quickly. There were, gosh, 8 or 9 different uses that, generally speaking, they all fall within a restaurant classification. So we had patios which did not have an existing which did not have a ratio in the existing parking table, but we've gone through parking regulation, or not, we've gone through patio regulations in association with restaurants. So we know they're an accessory use to the restaurant. Therefore, it makes sense to tie patio parking to the restaurant parking. Hope that made sense. A lot of the other food-related, brewery-related, dinner theater type uses were all folded under the respective food establishment unless it was a specific one. Sorry, let me try and be a little bit more specific on that. There are a couple of...
Don't mind 1 second, I'm going to interject something. There is construction going on the 3rd floor, so you may hear some random large sounds. That's what that is. So, and also Institute for Transportation Engineers.
Thank you. So there are a number of what I would consider restaurant-related uses that are expressly prohibited within the city. And so those are the ones that are in that pink salmon color highlight. But we have things like a cabaret, a cafe, a dance hall, microbrewery, nightclub, tavern, tap room, after-hours club. None of those require parking categorization because they are all expressly prohibited within the city. So you'll see those filtered all the way down towards the bottom. Okay, could you go back to your left-hand side there, Mr. Mayor, please? Let me direct you to scroll down, please. Let's go to the next page and keep going. Right, whoop. So, yep, let's right about there. So we've got a number of very explicit residential uses. Apartments, apartment houses, trailer parks, single-family attached, single-family detached, relocatable, two-family dwellings, mid-rise apartments, and mixed use are all residential types that are at one point called out in the zoning code. So you see that we have in the express column only 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 of those are expressly denoted, in expressly categorized. So the others relatively easily slot into the all residential units, including accessory structures, used as dwellings or dwelling unit category. So therefore, we're looking at two spots per dwelling or dwelling unit. I can't get it out. Okay, so that would be very consistent with all of the residential provisions or proposals that you'll see here. So you guys currently have public, private, secondary, and educational schools and higher educational and elementary schools called out, a lot of those expressly. I would suggest that the state is going to sort of supersede what your parking regulations might require. And honestly, what are the chances that you guys are going to have a new school building within the city limits in the immediate future here? The state's parking regs, I have a feeling, are going to take precedence over a lot of those. I don't know, Glenn, if you have any.
I agree.
Yeah. So in a way, there's some potential conflict with state requirements there. It might be worth just eliminating the elementary, secondary, high school uses, so it's a non-factor, and then just consider private schools as a separate category. Did that make sense? Okay. Okay, so scrolling to, could you go down a little bit more, Mr. Mayor, please? Keep going down. Down. So right about there, actually, yeah. So the one at the top, telephone central office. I don't know what a telephone central office is, but I think some of this is a little bit dated. But the fact is that there are going to be utility buildings that are required, and that didn't really have a great category as it stands today. And I lost my line. I'm sorry, let me find it. There it is. So I'm proposing, if you scroll to the right, please, a utility/infrastructure class for parking ratios. And this really is going to apply to the telephone central office, the electric/gas utility building, fire station, and structures deemed necessary by the city for public service, health, and safety. So those are a couple of random ones that get put together under the utility infrastructure class. And basically, the operators of those locations are going to have to tell us what parking they need. We don't want to tell a, single utility tower that normally doesn't need any parking except for a dirt road access. We don't want to have them building parking for no reason at all. So where it's a specific utility use, allow them to tell us what they need. Let them have some of the burden in that, because otherwise we're going to be making we don't have a lot to base a ratio on. So we would be making a educated guess at what they might need, and that isn't going to hold up super well. Glenn, it looks like you got a question.
I'm just thinking, so in the context of a utility proposal, that would probably, some sort of a utility use should probably go through site plan review perhaps. So that would be a conversation with the Planning Commission about what's appropriate for parking, and the Planning Commission could attach a condition to its approval as to parking, whether it be none or some number of spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there were also a couple of uses called out that dealt with parking. So private garages and public or private parking lots. I didn't propose a parking ratio for a parking lot because it doesn't quite make sense. But you will see them listed in here as an explicit use. The only one I think I skipped here is places of worship. So there were the churches, cemeteries, and undertaking, how did they term it here? Undertaking parlors and undertaking supplies. And then, of course, church and other place of worship. So the church the explicit use of churches or places of worship did not have a explicit parking ratio established. So we used the one that was consistent with the restaurants and said if the total cumulative space is under 10,000 square feet, no parking required. If it's over 10,000, then one spot for every 400 square foot. So that was sort of, if you will, the default one, because it was sort of the middle of the road option that was in the code already. Okay. Were there any categories that anybody would like me to specifically go through here? I don't want to just drone on unless it's helpful.
Yes, I would. I noticed that performing arts theaters does not have its own category unless it's 10,001 square feet. That might be just fine for a gym where you don't have that many people coming and don't have that many parking spot needs. But if you are a performing arts theater of the exact same size, square footage-wise, you might have 200 seats.
Yeah.
And your parking needs are massively larger than the gym that has maybe 40 or 30 people at the max doing their PT.
Absolutely. And I struggled with that.
Are we putting an unfair burden on sizing of buildings by doing that? If the theater wants to build 10,500 square feet or 9,900 square feet, and they still have the same amount of seats, shouldn't their parking be the same? I mean, the same requirements for those 200 seats?
I went back, Lauren and I had a long discussion about this exact point, about this and churches where there is seating and there is some degree of seating that is known at the time of site design. And it's a similar sort of argument about consistent with the commercial areas.
Yeah.
And that, I think, weighed heavily in our mind on how to get something without overburdening the developers or the proposed uses. It's a anytime you put a number out there, a threshold number, there will be people who will try and game that number.
Yeah.
And there's
and
only,
it's a very reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
To game that number
yeah.
because you're spending millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
To do that. And you remember that we just had that happen. The building and licensing had to go by the rules, even though they jumped through hoops to make building sizes different.
Yep. So I'm sorry.
Did you give any consideration to, rather than square footage, using the number of seats? It seems to me the theaters and the places of worship would be comparable in that. Because they've got a certain number of seats, certain number of patrons, if you will, that are all there at one time, unlike a gym where they come and go.
Yep.
Did you
I
give any?
we did consider that. And the difficulty with that we found was the long-term maintenance of those numbers. So what I mean by that is you can get at the initial site design, you can get some indication as to what they're proposing. Say they have 200 seats for the movie theater. Okay, well, we can work from that, but then how do we verify what's actually built and what is subsequently used for? It's similar to the difficulties in using employment counts, where you have a lot of variability as well. The argument could be that you're never going to have a full capacity theater, so you don't want to design for all of the seats. There's a number of arguments about it. I sort of fell on one side, Lauren fell on another side, but we went with the approach that was already in your code. Because we didn't want to have something radically different proposed at this stage without you guys telling us, hey, we should consider something a little different than we've been doing.
We
I
can't have.
I want to give a little more thought to it. I'm not ready to dismiss it by the number of seats, but there are situations. A church might be designed for a maximum of 300 people or something. Okay, that's fairly rigid. Sometimes there can be less, seldom ever any more. But then your theater could be designed for a proscenium type arch thing that seats 300 people, or they could do theater in the round that might squeeze in another 100. So I think you would have to go by whatever the maximum number of seats are. But it's still somewhat appetizing to me, I guess, by going by that for capacity limits rather than by number of square feet. Ed, I'm sorry.
And I tend to lean that way as well. I'm sorry.
I just don't think we can use a different. We can essentially what you're proposing is we have different standards, one for theaters and another for everything else. If we're going to use number of seats, then you have to do it for restaurants. You have to do it for other commercial uses. One of the, we called out clear space explicitly, and one of the rationales on the objection of that entire project, which I never understood, is by right, you could have 3 different restaurants on those 3 different lots with 150 seats, turning over 3 or 4 times a night, but there was such opposition about a theater with 200 seats that would have 1 showing a night. I don't see how we can use one standard for theaters and other uses and another one for restaurants and other commercial uses.
If you have a restaurant, you have people coming and going all night long. If you have a theater, you have a massive outlet at one point in the night, and that was what drove the residents crazy.
Well, there must be a planner's formula that translates square footage into a number of cars or patrons. Is that right?
Yeah, and that from the Intelligent Transportation Engineering journals, yes.
ITE.
ITE. Those are some of the resources we use, yes. There are, the problem is that there's a wide divergence of data sets. Finding a corollary to Rehoboth Beach was tricky when we looked at the previous comparisons for hotel uses. So there is data to compare to. It's not as robust as I would like. I would always like better, but there's some data out there.
I have a question. In listening to this, we're never going to pick all the categories, and I have a similar line of thought to Commissioner Czerniawski. It's either residential or it's not. And why don't we just go by size? 2,500 square feet is going to require this based upon capacity. 5,000 is going to require this. 10,000 will require this. And really simplify it, because this, to me, I look at this and I go, I get foggy. Because this doesn't help anything. It's still, there's lots of inference in all of this versus just saying, based upon capacity of this building. I don't care what you're doing with it. But if you have a 10,000 square foot building, we're going to require you have 20 parking spots. I'm making it up. But, I mean, is there a formula like that that's much more simplified rather than going through categories? It's just based on square footage?
The more you try to simplify, the more you have to generalize, the more that you're going to find you're going to need to generalize to the larger size. And you will end up overbuilding parking if you're overgeneralized. So there's a limit there on how you want to.
Do you have an example, though, of that, of how you would over?
Oh, malls.
Generalize?
Malls would be the historic shopping mall that was developed during the 80s and 90s. The parking requirements for those were generally tremendous because of the size of the square foot of the proposed uses for the entirety of them. If you look at almost any shopping mall in America, 80% of the surface lot parking is unused during 80% of the time. So it's a fantastic waste of space.
But I don't think we have that issue here. I
We
mean,
don't have that issue
and
here.
So, but that's why I'm just wondering, for simplicity's sake, that it seems like are you a dentist or are you a coffee shop? Are you a mortuary or are you a bowling alley? I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous, quite frankly, going through all these categories, in my opinion. If you build a big building, you're going to need parking for it. It's based upon capacity.
I think he just made the point where malls are an extreme of that example.
Right, but we're not a mall. But if you use Commissioner Czerniawski's example of just sheer capacity, whether you have 150 people eating dinner that turn over 3 times, or you have 200 people coming to a performance, or you have people going to an amusement park or going to a bowling alley, whatever, you're still going to require parking for those people, whether they stay an hour, they stay 20 minutes, they stay 3 hours. And so my point is, rather than categories, why don't you just base it on capacity?
Capacity of the building.
Of the
not-
building,
not the
right. So if it
lot.
is a theater that has 300 people capacity, but it's a gym that says we only allowed 100, but they're both 10,000 square feet, that comes down to the building and licensing group to say, okay, a gym's capacity is this based upon the fire code, and a theater's capacity is this, and it's going to require X amount of parking.
Does that discriminate at all between a gym where it's way spread out as far as the number of patrons versus a church where you're all?
I think you take the shell and you decide what's the capacity of the building. It's the same with workers. If this building can fit 50 people or 60 people, what does that require for parking spaces? Or if this building can fit 1,000 people, what's it going to require for parking?
And I think what we did was tie the hands of building and licensing and upset the whole apple cart. I think that's what you're saying, Tim.
Well, that's what we're running into. I mean, we're still inferring, and if we use the clear space example, it's a perfect example of inferring it. I can look at it one way and you can look at it another way. Neither's wrong, but it's how I interpret it, and it puts us back in the same mess again.
And I think you said to let the building and licensing make a decision. If you're a gym, or if
Well, it's
you...
based on capacity, right? All buildings have to have a capacity to them. It's just like restaurants do, right?
Capacity regardless of use. In
Right.
other words, take that building and
You could have a call center of
Calculate
50 people, or you can have a restaurant of 50 capacity.
And like a gym, really, the formula is how many people can sit in there in rows versus how
Every building in town has a capacity to it, doesn't it? No? Restaurants, no?
but it
As far as I know,
changes depending on use.
Right, the city does, the capacity issue of the restaurants, as far as I understand, is determined by the fire marshal. We don't have any coordination to that. We don't have any records of capacity issues for the city. I mean, you go to other major cities and you'll see a posting, capacity of X number of people in it. We do not do that. That's done by the state fire marshal.
But there were restaurants this weekend that had lines not letting people in because of capacity.
Based on the fire marshal.
Right, but that's what, but it's still, there's still a number attached to a building, right?
Do those numbers first, Matt, do those numbers change depending on what the building is doing? If you're a restaurant, you have a number, or if you're a theater, you have a number, or if you're a bowling alley, you have a number?
Or retail.
Is that, I wonder if that
I think
changes.
so, because, based on the fire marshal, because you've got different aisle requirements for, I'm assuming this, I would think you have different aisle requirements and egress requirements for a restaurant versus a church versus a theater.
Yeah, I believe that's the case, but I'm not positive.
Nick, are you aware of any other municipalities that utilize parking standards based on square footage or capacity as opposed to use?
Off the top of my head, I know that there are ones that do so. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who specifically right now, or I can certainly put together a list of who does what, if that would be helpful for you guys to see.
And
I know that Susan went back and looked through a bunch of communities. She might have some numbers on that. She used to. She had numbers.
and I see the potential new zoning category that you've suggested. Have those been defined anywhere, or is that?
No.
Okay.
These are explicitly for this purpose, only for me to try and put a grouping together that makes sense. Yep.
Would you all mind taking a brief pause when we go to the members of the public and then come back to us? Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this topic? All right, if you do, raise your hand later. We'll come back to the commissioners there.
Hand went up.
Yep.
Mayor.
Oh, Francis, come ahead. No, wait, let's make sure that microphone's on, and then restate your name. Some don't know you.
Frances Kelleher, resident. The only thing I wanted to say about the churches is that, again, yes, the building might hold, a certain number of people and that, but a lot of people who go to the local churches from the town walk to church.
Right.
And people who come in, or, visitors or even people who are elderly and need to come closer, they'll drive. But again, it's for like limited times, if you will, on a Sunday morning primarily.
Right.
And the city kindly allows for people to park around the churches plus and minus an hour or something, I think, of when the services are. So I just think, again, like maybe churches need to be exempted because they're just a different situation than what I'm thinking. I mean, I think the theater example is really different, where you have a really big group of people coming for a pretty good amount of time and coming in and all out at this exact same time. I don't know. But anyway, I just thought the churches, and again, the general thing is, even if you took the whole boardwalk as an example of all the fun land, all the activities along the boardwalk, I mean, that's why we have all the parking spaces in the streets, and, people come and go and park on the street. But it still seems to me the theater is a kind of a unique different situation.
May I ask a
Thank you,
question?
Francis. Yes, Nick?
I just, obviously, I'm not from Rehoboth, so I don't know. Is there much parking demand at the churches?
I don't really think so. I mean, what I would say is, I can only speak for the church I go to.
Yeah.
They only have, I think it's about 8 or 10 parking spaces. They have a teeny little place, and the only people who are allowed to park there are the people who are going to be serving. So that's really kind of restricted. They do have a big side yard at the rectory, and people are also allowed just during services to kind of, if they need, they could park on the yard. But, you know, I think again, early on or Sunday morning, I'll tell you when it's a little more, I'll be honest, there's a little bit, probably more of a harder time, but then people adjust when they go. There's a tougher time because they do have some services on a Saturday evening, and you can't really find a parking space anywhere, even if you have a city tag, you know, I mean, you just can't find a parking space. That's more difficult. You just end up having to park, you know, 4 blocks, you know, out if you were. But then Sunday morning, you know, before 10, I don't think there's ever any problems, especially because on King Charles, there's all the perpendicular spaces. So there's lots of spaces along King Charles. Where I think there's 3 churches along King Charles, 2 near each other, and then there's another church a couple blocks down the street.
Thank you very much. It's just helpful to understand what the local impression is. They're the ones dealing with the parking.
Well, I'd see it a little different, but my recollection is we have 4 churches in town, right? Christian Science, which has their own parking.
Okay.
We've got Epworth, no, we don't. We have All Saints on Olive that has some off-street parking. We've got the Presbyterian Church on King Charles. We've got St. Edmund's Church on St. That's right, it's 4, right? And they all have some off-street parking, but they need, some of the parking is for locals that walk, or there are locals that walk, but there are a lot of people that drive in to St. Edmunds, for instance, from 10 miles away. So we do need that parking space, in my opinion. And then besides your church services, you've got the evening dinners, and you've got church service in the evening and stuff like that. So.
Mayor, a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I believe, so we got some homework to do. I mean, so we need to research other communities and what their calculations they use. So I think that will be another due out. I mean, continuing this conversation, it's a good dialogue, but I think we owe you, based off of the feedback, what I'm hearing is we owe you more information. List of other communities, what their calculations are. Corey Schinko, our assistant building official, is monitoring in the back here. And so he sent me the international fire code, and actually the international building code. They use the habitable floor area divided by the occupant load factor equals the maximum occupant load. So I think those additional information and how that's derived would be beneficial at the next workshop meeting to continue the conversation, because I think there's more information that you need and require.
So is there anything else you want to articulate as far as homework to task city manager and Nick with?
The only other thing that I could look to, again, as part of this equation being completed, is we're talking of use here. So we also have the table of use regulations as it relates to our zoning. So any of the new use categories that you've designed or are interpreting, how does that then eventually go into the zoning use table of C1, C2, C3, R1, R1S, those types of things? We have a very specific table of those with tier levels 1, 2, and 3, which I also think are very cumbersome. So I don't know whether it's a time to also reevaluate that or take a use, because we also have had trouble with zoning versus use.
As every town does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, part of the equation, just as long as that is part of the discussion, that they either agree or there is some stipulation made within our table of use, or zoning, use within zoning, there we go, that these new categories or how we interpret the existing categories are changed. Again, that's down the line, but it's a critical, in my opinion, a critical part of this review.
Funky, did you have?
Yeah, the only, I'm listening to this, and I'm trying to establish this whole idea of being able to come up with some kind of reasonable way, thank you, a reasonable way to sort of allocate what we have with regard to available parking, you know, and whether or not, and then, so I'm thinking about this in terms of how can we, like, basically determine what a business I guess we're just talking, I mean, I'm thinking in terms, in context of a commercial establishment, but it doesn't have to be that. But we're not talking about time, and not only just time of day, but the duration of that use. And I'm thinking in my head, the difference between a performance theater versus a restaurant, and then like a restaurant that would have like multiple seatings over the course of an evening versus a carryout place where people are going to be coming and picking up pizzas and leaving them, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, but I still think these are things that we can kind of quantify. I mean, I think there's a way that you can sort of establish what the load is, and then therefore what each of these establishments contributed in creating that load or whatever, and then being able to sort of parse that out somehow. So maybe I'm thinking way too complicated, and then the other thing is, you know, in terms of time of day, like we were talking about the church in the Sunday morning, we got plenty of parking, you know, and then conceivably, if we have like nightclubs or restaurants that are open late, there's probably much available parking, but it's the other times that you got to contend with all that stuff. So, and that's where it gets thorny. And then something like, you know, clear space, I think, got to be an issue, but we're talking about a impacted event that is going to be happening there on a regular basis that I think we foresaw was going to really screw things up, you know. So, and I think that was the rationale. But were we effective or ineffective in demanding that they have X number of parking? You know, I don't know. You know, I don't know if we did that or not. I mean, I think we did, but I'm just looking at this as a kind of a more holistic way to look at it, and making it more complicated. So anyway,
if I may, a couple comments. So one, right now you guys also have a downtown parking study going on, I believe, and I think that we need to make sure that we're looking at their charge and what they are going to be coming back with in terms of recommendations to address the current. So the problem with what I'm doing here is that it's only applying to the future. It's not going to apply to any of your issues today. And so the downtown parking study is looking at that issue to try and ameliorate the current issues. But what we don't want to do is create more issues by virtue of any of the changes that we propose here. And so we need to make sure that we are consistent with the recommendations that come out with from, I believe it's the Rossi Group who's doing that study. They're excellent. So I just want to say, timing-wise, it would be good to get the input from that in consideration with everybody else's input before you make any type of like final determinations.
Lawrence, refresh our memory on what the timeline is expected. I think they still have a ways to go before.
They do.
finalized.
They do, Mayor. It's ironic. I actually have an email I'm drafting right now to our Rossi Group consultant, Alexis Morris, and I was linking you and Lauren up. I'm like, we just need to kind of bring the heads together. Because some of the homework that we're assigning you all is like nearby communities, determine parking definitions, uses, and really kind of bring everybody together and to help inform and influence that follow-on parking / traffic / transportation study. So,
Because there might be recommendations that are going to come out of their group that are going to say, hey, condense your parking categories to 5. I'm making things up here, so, so let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's get everything that we can, and I'll continue to consolidate the information that y'all request, and we'll keep trying to whittle this down till we get it right.
Anything else
I think I just must have missed it, the timeline for the parking study, roughly?
no real timeline per se. They have been doing on-site research. They're actually going to be coming back. It was in my update, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was just a preliminary. I can pull that up. We're moving into the fall timeframe where they're going to come and start doing on-site surveys. They're going to use our Reach Out Rehoboth platform to conduct some of those surveys. So I can go back and resend that generic timeline to the commissioners by the end of the day today, if that works. I don't have it roughly, unless you want me to take the time to serve it.
No, I'm just thinking, just rationally or hopefully, it may even be 2024.
The final results will come in, and believe in the spring of '24.
Spring, okay, that's good enough, thank you.
One other kind of global question here. In working on this, is your perspective to deal with exactly what we have now, and or is there any look to the future of what we want the city to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now with regards to the use of what's in the city to encourage a certain type of use or character of the city, of this something of this nature based on parking, or I don't know whether I'm expressing myself correctly, but just a
I
vision.
think I see where you're going. So I have intentionally tried to take a conservative approach in this, in that I'm trying not to propose anything radically different than what's currently there, and that it is not, by using those existing sort of standards, not changing radically anything in the future. That's for you guys to address. My role right now is to provide clarification based on the existing text, on the existing language. Where could we reasonably slot these unaddressed uses? And for those that we can't reasonably slot, what would be a reasonable container for them with a reasonable ratio?
Reacting to a problem as opposed to planning for the future, for a long future view.
This is not a forward-looking effort right now. No.
Okay.
This is basically trying to, I don't want to say patchwork, but we're trying.
Data is the word I use.
We're trying to fill in gaps and make everything seaworthy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sorry, to be clear though, if you guys direct us to take a more expansive view, we certainly can. We absolutely can. We are, our direction is to, until told otherwise, take the conservative approach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else from up here? No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
I think we can release him to leave if he likes. He's got a 3-hour, 4-hour drive back home. Thank you very much.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Yep. And it's like, well, just kind of review, we've got some homework to do connection with the Rossi Group. Everybody review the video, looking at the adjacent communities, and kind of tie that in together. Acknowledging several commissioners' view to look at the long approach and try to incorporate immediate needs with a very elongated approach to the city.
I'll tell, yeah. Actually, do you mind if I sit in? Because I'm curious on D, on your, the natural areas or acceptable materials.
Oh, yeah, feel free to sit in the,
Thank you.
And Commissioner, to your question, just Commissioner Sharp, Commissioner's briefing number one, like the staff is currently in receipt of the Rossi's current situation document and some of their raw reconciliation of all previous studies. They are in that preliminary draft. It's a 20 megabyte, 40-page document that we're currently reviewing. I provide preliminary comments back to Lex, our consultant, who is taking that one, and we have a meeting later on in the week. So that's working through. We got briefing number one this fall, briefing number two late fall, briefing commission for like early spring with a finalized report of spring 2024.
Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to the next item of new business, which is to discuss appointment of a chair for the Stormwater Utility Task Force in the absence of Commissioner Lagree. As you know, Commissioner Lagree has graciously served as and effectively served as chair of Stormwater Utility Task Force, and he steps down as of a couple weeks, and we will be absent a chair for the Stormwater Utility Task Force. The work of the Stormwater Utility Task Force continues. And Jay has offered to continue to chair that. He's certainly the most knowledgeable in it. City manager has offered that he would like and favors Jay continuing, if that's all right to say.
Yes, sir.
And the one conundrum would be, if you will, that our committee policies require a commissioner to chair the task force and committees, et cetera. Now, we can say precedence has been broken and set. When Mayor Coons was mayor, he appointed me as citizen to chair the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, which I did for another year or two or more after that, until we then got Jay aboard. So precedence has been broken and set, if you will. I would think that possibly the reason Mayor Coons was comfortable with me chairing as a citizen was because I had served as a commissioner for 12 years before that, and I knew the ins and outs of freedom of information and how to conduct an effective meeting, if you will. Well, obviously, I think that same criteria applies to now Commissioner, future former Commissioner Jay Lagree. So my intent would be to nominate citizen Jay Lagree to take over as chair for the next year or however long it takes. Are there any questions or discussions?
I'm in favor of that.
I would support that.
I do too.
All right, so that'll be on the next agenda for a formal vote, so we can formalize that. So we're not getting rid of you yet.
I think ex officio status, we should have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
Yeah, gotcha. With that, is there any public discussion of that? No nods. With that, we're going to go to the next item of business, new business, which is discuss mayoral nominations for appointments or reappointments to Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission, Parks and Shade Tree Commission. There is a support document in there that lists my nominations. The mayor has the privilege of nominating the new members for or reappointments for Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, with the confirming votes of the commissioners. So a support document shows those that I have suggested I'm going to nominate. My support document also shows the entirety of the current Planning Commission makeup right now. I do apologize to for the couple typographical errors there. But otherwise, how I normally approach this is I confer with the chairs, so it's not just me going in there and making these decisions on who's who. I confer with the chairs. I ask them about who would they like, who would they like to appoint, who would they like to dismiss or replace. What is the attendance? 'Cause I put a lot of weight on the attendance at these meetings, because there's certainly a lot of people in the past that have applied for these positions that have indicated they have the ability to show up for most, if not all, the meetings. So obviously, I would want anybody that we reappoint to also have that similar commitment. And so these chairs have approved all the names and nominees in front of me, and they are the following. For the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, which all are appointed for 3-year terms. Michael Bryan, Julie Davis, and Jim Ellison as reappointments for the Planning Commission. For the Board of Adjustment, Jan Conacy and Mark Saunders. For the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, Catherine Downs or Katie Downs and Marty Moreno, I think Marty's only served 3 months at this point. So those are my nominations. Are there any questions or discussion?
None from me.
If not, well, thank you very much. I'll put them on for the September regular meeting for consideration of appointments. With that, we're going to go to the next item of new business, which is presentation by Building and Licensing Department on acceptable materials for driveways, walkways, sidewalks, and natural area. If you recall, I think Commissioner Sharp brought this up at a previous meeting when Jay was doing his presentation on permeable driveways. And so that's what precipitated this conversation there. Do you have your own presentation, or are you using mine?
Morning, Mayor. I'm going to use the one that you have up on your screen there.
Let me squeeze it to the... Okay, this is just a PDF that's embedded in the agenda, so it's not a perfect slideshow.
Great. Well, good morning. My name is Corey Shinko, Assistant Building Inspector. Thank you for having me back here. This presentation today is to hopefully answer some of the questions you have relating to acceptable materials that we use for driveways and sidewalks, other areas that they're called walkways, and then how that ties in with natural area. And I'll take questions at the end. I don't have access to the slide from up here. I'll start with driveways, otherwise known as off-street parking, private roads or driveways as they're called in many portions of the city code. This information that you see on this slide actually comes from the curb cut section, Chapter 232, Article 6. It is the only point in our city's either municipal code or the zoning section of that code that defines in any way what a driveway is. And it is defined in that section as off-street parking, as a hard-surfaced off-street parking. As you can see, it has, these are or statements, so 2 inches of stone or tar and chip, concrete or blacktop, brick or tile or wood. And per city zoning code, under the definition of structure, the very tail end of that definition, driveways and sidewalks are excluded as structure. So they're in their kind of their own category as far as lot coverages go. Rehoboth Beach defines lot coverage as anything that that is a structure on a lot. You have a maximum of 40% you can use. Apart from that, you have a minimum requirement of 50% for natural area, which is area dedicated to grass, plantings, plant beds, natural mulch, and in other areas. We have our own section on what mulching can be, but for right now, we have a minimum requirement of that, of 50% for each lot. This is for residential districts. Driveways and sidewalks are the two that aren't considered structure. And because of that, looking at what driveways are, none of these really are defined as natural area either. So they're not a structure, but they also aren't natural area. So what we do in building and licensing for zoning compliance is we ensure that the parcels have a maximum of 40% structural coverage, a minimum of 50% natural area, and the rest can be used, whether it be 10% or more, for these driveways and sidewalks, because we can't include them in natural area, because stone, tar and chip, concrete, blacktop, brick, tile, and wood are not recognized as natural area. We can go to the next slide, please.
Wood and mulch
So,
are not, or wood, like a wood boardwalk is excluded, but wood mulch, I would think, would be natural.
That's correct. We have our own, under the definition of natural area, for mulching areas, we have it worded there that while that land, it's important to remember that the beginning of the definition of natural area is that which is dedicated to natural area. So if it's dedicated to a driveway or it's dedicated to a sidewalk, in and of itself, it's not dedicated to natural area. We do have mulched areas though, and we exclude clamshells, cut stone or gravel, pea gravel, anything like that. And we have excluded rubber mulch as well, as it's synthetic. Natural mulch is still seen as natural area, as it fits the definition of mulch, of a mulched area. And if that mulch were to be used as a little mulched walkway, that would still be seen as a natural area. If it was wood and it was used to build a deck, a ramp, or some kind of platform or a landing of some kind, that would be seen as a structure. And I've got some photos of different types of driveways in Rehoboth that kind of show what we have currently in the city. And there is a fairly big distinction to be made between those that have sidewalks that affront the properties and then the areas of Rehoboth that have no sidewalks. And you'll be able to see in the pictures, there's quite a big difference between how these driveways look and what materials are more or less used between these different areas in Rehoboth. So these two photos represent a crushed stone driveways in the areas that we have sidewalks in town. As you can see, with these ones here, there's the threshold between where the gravel driveway is meeting the concrete sidewalk. There's no buffer there. So there is some spillage of stones that seep onto the sidewalk. This is not the case for the areas of Rehoboth that don't have sidewalks, but this is something that we try to minimize whenever we have new applications come in for driveways. If they have a sidewalk to them, we try to minimize this approach. With the driveway though, if it has 2 inches of compact stone, it does meet that definition that was that's referenced in Chapter 232, Article 6, under curb cuts for a hard surface parking space. We can go down one more slide, please. You see here the crushed stone driveways in areas of Rehoboth without sidewalks. In this case, the crushed stone goes out to the road. It's also worth mentioning here, in a lot of parts of Rehoboth that don't have sidewalks, we allow a up to 12-foot stone shoulder that starts at the end of the pavement of the road, and then that 12-foot is measured inward towards the property lines. And so in these areas, there is no recommendations as far as trying to motivate the contractors to not put the stones right next to a paved road. And in these photos here, the paved driveways for ingress and egress of the vehicles onto the private lots extend straight out to the road. If we scroll down, we'll be able to see, I believe it's the cut stone. So these are cut stone driveways. This is one with sidewalks. These are cleaner and neater, as there's no spillage of rocks that could have the potential to go over city sidewalks and pose a tripping hazard if too many of them came out. And in the next slide, you'll see a cut stone driveway without sidewalks, where the driveway comes out to meet the pavement, I believe. Some of these driveways as well, it's worth to note that they have these types of stone driveways. Then they go out to meet the 12-foot crushed stone shoulder, and then that then meets the street, the paved street. And there's quite a few properties in Rehoboth that have those types of driveways as well.
So Corey, in this example, would they be allowed to extend the pavers all the way to the asphalt roads?
I have allowed that, and that's also to help ensure that when tourists come, that they know not to block that, because when you have the private, some of these properties are located 30 feet from the edge of the pavement to their property lines. And in heavy tourist season, it's hard, without the yellow lines that are spray painted on the roads, it's hard to tell which ones lead to the private ingress and egress of the private properties. So just like a normal street in Rehoboth that has sidewalks, their private driveways are allowed to extend out into the streets. And because of the apron and the curb cut there where it goes past the sidewalk, it's very clear to distinguish between the private driveway and where we have on-street parking. In these cases, we allow for them to use the materials out to the street's edge to show that it's their private ingress and egress, and that parking shall not be used by tourists. Because in the cases where they have the stone shoulders, it can be difficult to tell.
When we do that, when we allow them to go all the way up to the edge of the asphalt, do we have a contract with them at all that indicates that if the city had to repair a water main and dig up their driveway, it's at their expense to repair the driveway?
That's noted in plan review that this is part of the city right-of-way. As such, with other things in that city right-of-way that would be existing structures. Some of them have existing fences or fountains, different koi ponds, other things like that, that if the city had to take a response in the city right-of-way, that the homeowner is responsible for the repair to their private property. And that's the same with when it comes to homeowners that have properties with sidewalks. Chapter 232 makes it clear that it is the duty of the property owner to maintain that sidewalk and the curb, even though that's in the city's right-of-way. And that same reasoning would be applied to homeowners that have properties without sidewalks.
Thank you.
Just curious. Oh, go ahead.
I think I must have just misheard something. In the instance without sidewalks,
Yes.
if the city had to tear up something and the homeowner abuts the paved road, if it's on the side that looks like private property, but it's really the city right-of-way, correct?
Correct.
So if the city has to tear that up, it would be the responsibility of the homeowner.
I would, the best way that I have to utilize a response if a homeowner came to me for that
Yes.
would be the exact same way on how I would respond to that if that street did have a sidewalk. And that way I would ensure that every homeowner would not depending on the property that they owned, were treated the same way. So if a property owner has a driveway on a street that has a sidewalk and the city has to tear it up, the road up, I think Public Works would be more apt to answer that question on who would pay for the repair. Usually, from my understanding, is that the city pays for the excavation for the street, but when it comes to the curb cut, the driveway apron, and anything else that might be related to the driveway of the individual owner, they would be responsible for paying for that.
Right, but I'm only talking about without sidewalks, because that's the slide that we're on. So I just wanted to get clear, without a sidewalk, it's just wherever the driveway material abuts the pavement.
Correct. We would most likely make the homeowner do the repairs there.
Yes, okay,
As the short answer, yes.
okay, thank you.
So just for trying to relate back to an earlier conversation, I don't know if you were listening at all on the parking, but that decision that you make or apply, would that be referred to as an inferred decision as opposed to specific? Because you are applying what is written in the code, but applying it to an existing situation that is not addressed in the code.
That's correct. When we have to make a decision, particularly zoning decisions that aren't explicitly stated in the code, the first thing that we pull back to is what can we infer from what the code does say. And we try to make consistent decisions. So if we can pull something from, in this case, how would we respond to a homeowner that is in this predicament that has a house that affronts a sidewalk, then we would take that same, we would infer that same decision to a property owner that has a house that does not affront a sidewalk.
Thank you.
The next slide, I believe, this is the stone tile. We don't see too many of these, but tile is specifically listed in the hard surface parking space under Chapter 232, Article 6. And this is one example of a stone tile driveway. And as you can see, this one does not affront a sidewalk. And I believe from the left and the right, you can see there are different materials to it. And in this case, just like the one we were discussing previously, the private driveway extends out to meet the city pavement of the street. The next slide, please. So we have quite a few different brick driveways in the city. This is an example of a brick driveway of a property that affronts a sidewalk. Here, the brick was taken up to the sidewalk. The sidewalk obviously is meeting the standards from Chapter 232, Article 1. And we have the apron area, which then leads, the apron/curb area, which leads to the city street. In the next slide, you can see a brick driveway on a house that does not have a sidewalk. If we can go to the next slide, please. And again here, it's important to note that these properties, the property lines are usually recessed in, and it varies between 10 feet and 36 feet, I've seen. So it really depends on where the property lines are, so it can be deceptive, but you can see in this case, the driveway material extends from the house, from the garage itself, all the way out to meet the street. But on either side of the city right-of-way, it's grass, it's natural area, and there's a few trees there. And we see many properties that are existing in Rehoboth are like this as well.
So just to simplify for me, this photograph indicates one can one can have a brick driveway all the way up to the paving.
That would be correct if,
Okay.
and if this is the case, yes.
So even though you're bricking city right-of-way, that is still acceptable?
That's correct. There's nothing in the code that explicitly prevents them from doing this. There is an article that's more or less of a policy that we allow for a stone shoulder.
Okay.
If we were to, let me rephrase this as well. If we were to ever construct a sidewalk, which the city is perfectly, has in their legal right to do, then we would force these properties to come into compliance with the sidewalk standards.
Sure. Thank you.
You could park on that grass too, then.
That's correct.
Also, in this instance, the property line, I'm just going to guess, is right about here somewhere.
That's correct. Most of the cases that we come in, everything's taken by a case-by-case basis on what they're doing and the applicability of how much we can enforce in plan review. But the goal of our zoning codes and our sidewalk and curb section of our code, Chapter 232, is to try to move in the direction of getting the stone shoulder in place on either side of the private driveway, so that there is more on-street parking, and it can be the optics are that it can be used for parking from tourists. Not that it's continued private property that extends all the way out to the pavement. And that is the direction that we try to go in. And the next slide, I believe, shows I only put one picture in here. I don't think there's going to be any questions about this. This is a standard concrete driveway existing with one that has sidewalks. We do have these as well that are in areas without sidewalks, and the concrete it's almost 50-50, whether it goes and meets the stone shoulder and then everything's stone shouldered across, or it goes and continues out to meet the street. And then it's a difference of if there's stone shoulders on either side of the driveway, or if it's grass or has many trees. It really differs once you get on the north side of town. Next slide, please. These are fairly popular now. These are taken from a few different new home builds recently, and the drive strips are used to help give back more natural area, as well as in the front yard area. And this is where it's different materials. Sometimes it's brick, sometimes it's cut stone. I have seen a few that have been concrete as well, and they're there used really to when the homeowners desire more natural area on their property, and that's where we see this. And these are pictures of drive strips with sidewalks, and I believe the next slide shows some drive strips in areas without sidewalks. And this is one that also was done fairly recently. And here you can see an example of the strips that end where the stone shoulder is. And this is why I wanted to bring up that it can be tricky with homeowners, because as you can see here, sometimes cars may park in the ingress and egress path. Maybe it's not completely, but they may put their hood of their car a little too close, which is why we like to either have the yellow lines painted, spray painted on the road, or to have these driveways that have, because by our code too, they have to have access to a main road, to their private property, and that has to be unobstructed. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to have the material used for their private driveway extend to the road. That also gives visitors a clear indication to not park there.
Corey, you indicated that this ribbon driveway stops 12 feet from the edge of the road per your earlier note. I would have looked at this and said, well, I would guess the ribbon driveway ends at the property line. Do those two coincide?
The policy put in place between building and licensing and public works for the stone shoulder on the streets that don't have sidewalks in Rehoboth only extends to a maximum of 12 feet. So when that's the case, as in this one, you could have properties that are, like I said, 35 feet back, and then you have a very long distance to go between the street, where that stone shoulder's allowed, and then where the property line hits. You could still have 15 to 20 feet there. So because of that, we don't want them driving over grass, and in some cases, these can act as almost like trenches with stormwater. We allow the materials to go all the way back so that they can have proper access, ingress and egress to their private properties from the road.
So are these policies adequate, or do we need to codify something? And then also, if you recall, this came up, I think, when Evan presented it 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and we deferred on looking at all the rights-of-way throughout the town. So this subject's kind of broader than just the natural area and stuff. But we're going to come back to that, I think, or we were intended to come back to that in the fall or something. So I just don't know the efficacy of using policy versus codifying some of this stuff.
I guess my comment would be, this is sort of informative at this point, and if it's something that you all want to take up, you certainly can. But one thing I notice working with building and licensing is that no two properties are the same. They have to make calls, judgment calls, all the time, and they try to be consistent, but it's just hard to have a cookie cutter, this is how it's going to be in every instance.
I agree. Commissioner Lagree.
When we adopt our stormwater utility, it's going to be based on the square foot area of permeable surface. A lot of the sidewalk, driveway, hardscape materials are now being manufactured with permeable surfaces. And I have a feeling that you'll probably want to give credit to people who use permeable surfaces. When Corey first started with the lecture, I thought, oh man, how are we going to work all that stuff into giving credit for permeable or non-permeable? But as he talked, I think it will fit right in, because they're having to make decisions one by one, and they can make decisions on permeable surfaces just as well as they can make decisions on where to run the strips and stuff like that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Corey. Thank you.
I wanted to piggyback on what Glenn said too, which is when something's not explicitly stated in the code, we absolutely have to make an inferred judgment call, and we try to be consistent with that. If we did want to codify something, we'd have to look, our own code is inconsistent with itself. And there are several different sections that touch on off-street parking. They're not included in here, but we have exhibits that are in our Chapter 232 on driveways and sidewalks, and these have minimum requirements as far as the size, the width that they're supposed to be. Same with the curb cuts. But these are also inconsistent with other portions of our code. So if we did want to codify something, we'd have to really look at a number of inconsistencies in our code that talk about driveways, sidewalks, walkways, and their construction as well as their general dimensions. But until then, what we have right now are the policies I've discussed in the slideshow so far. We try to make it safe for residents to park inside their properties, that they have safe access to the street without having tourists park or visitors park in those spaces, as well as the recommendations to use certain materials over others. We can't put on undue requirements, but we can make strong recommendations to make sure that pedestrian travel is safe. And if we could go to the next slide, please. I believe that begins to talk on sidewalks. The general information for sidewalks is that it's an impervious surface. I know there's been a lot of discussion on this. Our city zoning code and our city municipal code doesn't have a definition for it, but what we can pull from is DENREC. And luckily in their administrative code, they've got a definition for impervious. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it's roughly something that stops or retards the flow of water. They don't say what that flow rate is, but they leave it at that. There's also something that DENREC pulled in stating that tamped gravel is seen as impervious. So that's just something that if we wanted to pull from an outside resource, we have outside organizations relegated that we can pull from their definitions if we need to, and that's what we use right now, because that's the only thing we really have to go off of. And if it's from Delaware or DENREC, then they're, we fall under their jurisdiction as well, and in building and licensing mind, we can use those definitions because they're the best ones we have. Just for sidewalks as well, other than the impervious surface, it does say concrete, composed of 1 part cement, 2 parts fine aggregate, 4 parts coarse aggregate. This is all stuff that's under the subsurface, and this is not considered a structure, but it's more than this. The next slide goes to more zoning requirements rather than general information. So when we have a survey laid out for a proposed construction activities, the sidewalks or walkways have to fit this definition, and there's 2 parts usually of the definition that comes from 270-4 in our zoning code. The paths of travel, and there's 4 different ones. The sidewalk can either go between a curb line and a property line, from a driveway to an entry, from a front property line to an entry, or between an exterior entry from a primary structure to an accessory structure. And if you see that the paths of travel, that first bullet is really only the only one there for public sidewalks. The rest of the definition, as far as the paths of travel is concerned, is with private sidewalks or walkways. So most of the definitions of our sidewalk is for private sidewalks. For the widths, again, this is, the first bullet is for public sidewalks. For private, I have that backwards. The first bullet is for private sidewalks, and that they shall be a minimum of 5 feet wide and shall have a maximum width coinciding with an adjoining sidewalk. I had it right the first time. Except where there is no adjoining sidewalk, the maximum width shall be 7 feet. So this is what we have to use for the public sidewalks. We have 1 or 2 houses right now that we're using the article that there is more than 50% of the lot of the block that is sidewalked. There's no sidewalk in front of that property, therefore they're going to construct a sidewalk, and they'll construct that public sidewalk to these standards. All others fall under the second bullet for their private sidewalks or walkways. All other sidewalks shall have a maximum width of 3 feet, except that a sidewalk leading to a main entry, usually the front door, shall not be more than 5 feet wide. However, within 3 feet of the main entry or steps, it's 3 feet there because of the minimum requirements for a landing for building code. They can go as wide as the entry itself. So if there's French doors, that sidewalk can then flare out to meet the width of the doors. And it may be as wide as the main entry or the steps leading to that main entry. So these are the requirements for the zoning that we have for sidewalks. What we allow typically on these walkways, if we can scroll down to the next slide, we have other walkways. And this is where on our zoning code, it falls under sidewalk, but an inferred judgment call comes out from the reading of that definition. And the actual definition, I have it here with me, of sidewalk is an impervious surface parallel to a street between a curb line and a property line, or from a driveway to an entry, or from a front property line to an entry, or between an exterior entry from a primary structure to an accessory structure, intended for use by pedestrians to the exclusion of vehicles. Sidewalks between the curb line and the adjacent property line parallel to a street or other way shall have a minimum width of 5 feet and shall have a maximum width coinciding with an adjoining sidewalk, except that when there is no adjoining sidewalk, the maximum width shall be 7 feet. And that's where we ended that last slide. This slide talks on the third portion of the definition of sidewalks. All other sidewalks, all of the sidewalks shall have a maximum width of 3 feet, except the sidewalk leading to a main entry shall not be more than 5 feet wide. However, within 3 feet of the main entry or steps leading to the main entry, it may be as wide as the main entry or steps leading to the main entry. This last side, let me rephrase that, is from the last sentence in the definition section. And this is where we get some inference. It says, all other walkway areas, including but not limited to walkways around pools and mazes through gardens, shall be considered structures. And because of the language used, all other walkways, it's putting this sidewalk as a walkway. It's including the sidewalk as a walkway, as it's saying all other walkways. If it wasn't defining sidewalk as a walkway, then it would simply say all walkways, and you would differentiate between sidewalk and walkway. So we have to use the term walkway because the definition goes through this elaborate paths of travel, the widths that they have to be, and then throws this last sentence in there that says all other walkway areas, which means that this is a walkway. So because of that, what we have done as far as walkways, private walkways, that fit the definition of impervious and that fit the definition of the sidewalk here, is that we make them have to go abide by the paths of travel. They have to abide by the maximum widths that they can be. And as far as impervious goes, if it stops or retards or slows the flow of water to the underground, we recognize it as a sidewalk under this definition. Any other sidewalks that are more than 3 feet wide, any sidewalks around pools, and any other walkways that don't fit that definition are counted in as structure. And that's what we have to go off of. That's the whole, all of the code sections we have to go off of with sidewalks and walkways of what we can grab from. We have seen some people try to do mulched little walkways, but as the mulch is there, it's recognized, if it's natural mulch, as natural area. So, and if it were a sidewalk, it wouldn't be seen as lot coverage, but we do have some. It's very rare, the number. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's very rare that we see mulched sidewalks. I think if we have another workshop, I will try to go out and find any existing mulched driveways, if I can, in the city of Rehoboth, to show what those look like, and if they're on streets that have no sidewalks or streets with sidewalks. But those, as of right now, this is all the material that we allow for sidewalks. It's really there to be for an impervious surface that follows the paths of travel, that has the minimum or maximum widths that it has to have. Next slide, please. To finish up with the natural area, this is everything that comes from our definitions in our zoning code: trees, grass, flowers, bushes, other plantings. Mulched areas used as vegetative ground cover. With that said, what we don't allow in those mulched areas, cut stone, rocks, gravel, clamshells, and any other hard surface material.
And we don't allow clamshells because?
The clamshells, they would not be seen as natural area because they're explicitly stated in the definition of natural area that they are to be seen as structure, that they are not considered mulched areas.
Well, and for the definition of natural area, it lists these things here on your slide, but it also says, for the purposes of calculating natural area, mulched areas shall be limited to the use of vegetative ground covers.
That's correct.
So that
the definition continues on from
would
there.
exclude clamshells, decorative stones, other hard materials. That's, so, Commissioner, I don't know. That's all in the definition of natural area, right?
That's correct. So when we have the natural area, it's really, we go off of the Delaware Erosion and Sediment Storm Control Handbook for soil stabilization. They do have mulched for permanent seeding, and they have what that mulched area can be, but again, it's not clamshells, stones, or other hard surfaces. So what we really want to see when it comes to natural area is what you have here is grass, permanent seeding with the mulched areas per the Erosion Sediment Control Handbook, plantings and trees and flowers and bushes.
Anything else?
Not on this slide.
We can go to the next slide.
It's the
should be the end.
question slide. Well, you were so nice to tell us at the beginning that you'd take questions at the end, and all we've done is interrupt you all the way through.
Okay. It's good sometimes when you have the information right on hand and we're looking at a specific picture.
Well, if you don't mind, we'll pause and go to the members of the public. Would anybody like to give us some feedback? Francis, come ahead. Start off with your name and
Frances Kelleher. I live in the Country Club Estates neighborhood. Could I ask one question to Corey before I say what I wanted to kind of say about the surfaces? Corey, you said in a nice way that people are now, like you showed those new homes with the strips, and that they like to have more natural area. But would it also be true to say that sometimes they're putting in those strips because they've actually maximized the amount of their structural space, and then they've maximized the 10% of the so that they're basically trying to stay within the 50% rule that they couldn't put, actually. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is sometimes those long driveway strips are there because they wouldn't be allowed to put a solid driveway all the way back because they've maximized so much of their area.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
That could be a possibility. It's important to remember that that driveway there is not thrown in with the 40% lot coverage. But we have seen, they will put 39.99% lot coverage. And when that's the case, they still are required to have that minimum 50% natural area, so they have 10% left.
To limit it to the.
And usually on a 5,000 square foot lot, they get 500 square feet. It's rare that I see that much surface covered with the walkways, because usually if they max out their lot coverage, they don't have a whole lot of space to put the walkways, or the walkways are pretty short. But it is possible, absolutely, if they covered the lot coverage up to 40.0%, and then had to put in wanted to put in a lot of sidewalks up to a certain percentage, they would use those drive strips to take up less. It's not structural coverage, but it's not natural area, and it's that in-between percentage that can be used. But as of right now, nothing in our code would explicitly prevent them from doing that. I couldn't cite a violation on them.
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
absolutely, anyone that's using drive strips are using that hardscape someplace else,
Yeah, exactly.
without a doubt.
Okay, so thanks for that, Corey. That's what I kind of wanted to get to. That it's kind of, some of it's obvious. Some of them are old, and they're actually in older homes, but you see them more now and more and more and more because of the newer houses. Okay. So I bought my house in Country Club Estate, or I built my house in Country Club Estates in 1992. I've said this before, when the building was still under the jurisdiction of the Country Club Estates Property Owners Association rather than the city. we were required to have our driveways be made of concrete. We weren't allowed to have asphalt or I don't think any other surfaces. I think the rule was the driveways had to be concrete. And maybe because the concrete is more expensive than asphalt, our driveways in my neighborhood, now I'm only speaking of my neighborhood, so one of the 5 neighborhoods of Rehoboth, our driveways tend to be smaller or small-ish, whatever. Some houses have no driveways. You'll see you'll see a gamut. You'll see even half of a pad just leading into the back of the garage or to the garage door. And then some houses have 1 car length to their driveway, and some, like mine, literally have just enough to fit the 2 cars in the single lane driveway. And I did kind of look around, and I could only find about a handful, maybe 6 or whatever, of people who have their garage at the very back of their lot where they have a full-length driveway. A lot of the houses in Country Club Estates area were built kind of sideways, I'll call them. They don't have their front doors facing the street, and the front doors on the side of the house. That's kind of like mine too. And in a lot of the houses, our driveways double bubble, if you will, as part of our sidewalk to the front, to the main entrance, the front entrance. So I built my house, was originally built as a handicapped accessible home. I have a short 2-car, will just fit on the driveway. And again, like I said before, my driveway becomes almost part of the sidewalk to the front door. I have a solid concrete sidewalk, which is a bit of a narrow, skinny S shape, so that it can lead and slope up to a small portico, just a very small, place where you would stand at the front door. But the concrete sidewalk slopes up and basically, I think, makes my house not look obviously, if you will, handicapped accessible, which, was part of the goal. I like to call it universally acceptable or universally accessible design. As you know, the ADA applies to public accommodation for the disabled, but it does not apply to private residential housing. And so I just want to say a little bit about disability. I won't go on and on about it, but I just want to say there are many kinds of walking disabilities, from people who have full paralysis, needing to, or not being able to walk. There are people with hemiparalysis, where half of their body is paralyzed. They're not only, say, their leg, they would have one leg that is paralyzed, but also their arm and hand may be paralyzed. These people cannot use walkers because they can't hold on to the walker. There are people who are ambulatory, and many people who need to stabilize with canes, crutches, leg braces, and walkers. And there are many conditions that lead to walking disabilities. And I just wanted to, there's neurological conditions, muscular, and it really goes way beyond even people with, it goes many conditions. Even a cancer patient who has muscle atrophy would need to stabilize their walking with a walker. You have stroke patients and people with severe stroke end up being partially paralyzed. And I just wanted to read this quote from the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. They like to say, quote, "Disability is the one minority that anyone may join at any time. You know, irrespective, it does not discriminate by race, religion, age. Young and old can be disabled. You can have an accident that disables you." So I would like to kind of refer actually to some of Corey's pictures to say that people with severe walking disabilities need a firm, smooth, non-slippery surface that also people who have real difficulty in stability and that a visually consistent surface is also very important for them. People with severe walking disabilities who are frail and unstable on their feet, they cannot walk on loose, unstable surfaces such as stones. You may think that pavers are firm and smooth, but to people with severe walking disabilities, the joints, grooves, gaps can be a real issue to their being able to walk. And I would actually like to ask all the commissioners sometime when you're out and about, check out Penny Lane. In the morning is a good time, like at 6 a.m. before the shops open. You will see, yes, Penny Lane has pavers. The whole lane undulates. It's got 5 storm drains all along it that all slope down. So you might think Penny Lane is accessible. It's not, you know, to many people who have walking disabilities. So as you consider surfaces and pervious versus impervious surfaces, please consider accessibility for the disabled in the residential properties. I want to refer back to an earlier meeting where Ms. Sharp mentioned she's got a really long driveway, around 2,700 square feet. Commissioner Lagree's got a short driveway, it's only 400 square feet. So I wanted to propose something for your consideration. Rather than thinking in terms of a ban on a given surface, like concrete, perhaps you could consider something that might cap or limit the amount of impervious surface or pavement, and then require that anything beyond that might need to be pervious. And I didn't mention also that, you know, if you're wheelchair bound, you do need that 5-foot square space in a driveway to be able to disembark, if you will, out of a van and do turnarounds. Okay, so I brought this picture. This is from the Army Corps of Engineers report, page 45. I just point out, here's the little area of Country Club Estates there with the one sewer line. The Army Corps states the estimated the watershed for Silver Lake is 324 acres, and they estimate 51 acres of impervious surface within the Silver Lake watershed. That comes up to be 15.7%. So what I'd really like to say and emphasize is that the city center is largely paved over, not so much the residential neighborhoods. So I would ask the commissioners, when they're thinking about pervious and impervious surfaces, focus where you can have the greatest impact, and that is the commercial and mixed-use areas. The residential, as Mr. Corey just mentioned, the residential properties already have code requiring 50% natural space, so I won't say any more about that. I also note what Mr. Williams said at a previous meeting about the where they piloted the pervious asphalt. Didn't seem to work too good. So I put down, I would like to ask the commissioners also to consider piloting any requirements first before they're imposed on the residents. So whatever pervious materials you might be thinking of, you know, that they be sort of tested and true, because again, as we've said at previous meetings, we have sand everywhere. Kids track sand back in toys, in toes, and you know, so your driveways end up being rinsed off, ends up being rinsed off in your driveways. I want to bring up again the 40% impervious streets that are 4 car widths wide. Even though it's been said that the impervious pavers can't take the weight of heavy trucks, I would like to propose that maybe consideration could be given to porous concrete that now exists, and maybe that could be used to pave the 2 parking lanes of the street, and then non-pervious concrete could be poured and put in the center where the heavy trucks go. And again, although I do recognize the issues with sand clogging up porous surfaces. And last but not least, I want to refer to Dewey Beach. People keep bringing up that Dewey Beach has this requirement for impervious driveways in the residential areas. So I'm not an expert on the Dewey Beach regulations. I'd refer to our building inspectors could really come and inform you what the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is. But I searched my darndest through the Dewey Beach building code online. I can find nothing that refers to, like in the residential areas, they're having the kind of codes that we have that limits the coverage to 50% of the natural area. All I can find is that they have, you know, minimum setbacks. And I'd like to also refer to one of Corey's pictures. It was that one house that we had, the one house he showed in Rehoboth. And Corey, do you mind flipping back at your houses, or can you do that?
The mayor has that.
Okay, so just, it's probably a couple back from where the houses are. Go back, back. Might be the next one. Might be the next one back. Nope, sorry, another one. This one. Okay, so this one, I just want to use this. It's not identical to Dewey Beach Homes, but it's kind of like how Dewey is. Dewey shouldn't really be compared to Rehoboth. It's like comparing apples and oranges. The majority of the houses in Dewey are like all tall buildings, and they're all side by side. They all have the front of the yard is paved over, and that's where they have their parking. And even some of the condos and houses in Dewey have the whole bottom of the surface is tarred over. So it's like almost 100% tarred over. So I just want to bring that up because, you know, when people bring up Dewey having the code for impervious surfaces, I think that is to help Dewey rectify the situation that has occurred where the buildings have all been built up almost like our center city, and that they're in a very different situation from our residential neighborhoods. So that's all I have to say, which I know is probably way too much, but I just wanted to bring up those points so that they can be considered when you're thinking about, you know, changing any requirements on pervious versus impervious surfaces.
Very good. Thank you, Francie. You gave us a lot of information. I think we'll need the minutes to help remember some of that, but that's very helpful. I want to bring up something that maybe maybe Carolyn or you or building licensing can help me with. There's a constituent that was reported twice at the RBHA meetings that she wanted to put in a pervious driveway and was not allowed to. And that's all I know. I haven't approached her to see what the situation is. Does anybody have a recollection of that? So let me do some more research because it was an interesting scenario that.
Yes.
No, I don't want to take time right now, but I'd rather go to her and ask her. We'll bring that up again. Is there anybody else that would like to say anything from the members of the public? How about the commissioners?
I just have a couple of
Yes, ma'am.
clarifications on the very first slide.
Number one,
Yes, please.
the title slide.
No, the one that says driveways, Mr. Mayor. On the topic that we're discussing, which is, I don't know where, there it is.
The next slide.
There,
this one.
there. Corey, on the 2 inches of stone, stone can be any type of stone?
Under my understanding, yes, there's crushed stone, cut stone, rounded stone. There's different types of, there's tile stone, as we saw in here as well. We have, it says 2 inches of stone. And so since it doesn't discriminate, I fall back again on, I don't want to put an undue enforcement onto an applicant.
Sure. Pea gravel does not get into that category, or does it?
As long as it's 2 inches thick,
Yes?
that they can show that, and it's cut stone, because we don't, so in the.
Wait, don't tell me how to build the watch, please. Is pea gravel a cut stone?
Under the current interpretation, yes.
Yes, okay, great. And under tile, tile is a stone?
We have tile. That's the only word there.
You could use an indoor tile and make a driveway?
I would certainly not recommend it.
Well, I wouldn't either, but I'm just wondering.
As of right now, we don't differentiate between types of tile.
And then on wood,
But there is such a thing as exterior tile
for driveways, that a car
or
could,
for
my.
patios, drives,
Okay.
whatever.
But you have
And-
to put it on concrete. You have to have a sub-base of concrete to attach the tile to. right?
okay, don't
If
need
it's
to
a
know.
finish.
Don't need to know, don't need to know.
Okay.
The wood category, I think, Mayor, you may have questioned that already. Mulch is included in wood?
Mulch is, it's a product of many different types of material.
Can you have a mulch driveway?
As of right now, I would err on the side of, the intention of the wood, I think, is to be wood, but I don't have anything to go off of what type of wood. So just like pea gravel, under the interpretation of that being stone, if the composition of the mulch shows actual wood being used with it, and they would provide 2 inches of that, I wouldn't have any grounds right now to turn that away, other than a personal interpretation. I'm inferring here with
Mind if
this.
I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Corey, but mulch is specifically called out as natural area. So the answer is no, it cannot be used as a driveway, correct?
So the driveways are not structure, but they also are usually not natural area either. Driveways and sidewalks exist in this, they're not structures, but in the case of everything other than mulch, they're also not natural area.
So if someone came to you with a plan that had an entire driveway of mulch, is it a yes or a no?
Under right now, it would be a yes, because I can't cite anything to say it as no, and as long as they showed me that it met the other specifications.
Okay, that's what I thought you said.
Mayor,
Carolyn, come ahead and identify yourself if you will.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident, but correct me if I'm wrong, if it's being used as a driveway, it does not count as natural area. It's the use that gets factored into.
That's correct.
So
yes.
I'm not asking about what's being used for natural area. I'm just asking whether or not you can use the material.
To your question, yes.
It's a variable scale, whether you need it for natural area or you don't need it for natural area. If you've got 18,000 square feet on your lot, you don't care about that.
Right. But I think the situation that the mayor was bringing up, if I'm remembering the story correctly, the person involved was told they couldn't use a pervious driveway, and it had something to do with emergency vehicles being able to access the home if necessary. I don't know if that's true or not. That it had to be such a base that emergency vehicles could get on. I don't know if that's in the code or if that was interpreted that way, but I think it has something to do with that.
Let me find out directly from the horse's mouth, and we'll bring that up again. Nick, would you like to offer something to say your name and relationship to the city?
Nick Walls, planning assistant with Wallace Montgomery. I just wanted to say that in Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Program has been dealing with the question of impervious since 1984, I believe. They have a lot of great references out there and a lot of research on these specific topics because they regulate impervious versus pervious within a specific area from the edge of tidal waters. So if you're looking for some good resources, definitely look to the Critical Area Commission. So I can help you with that if you'd like to.
Thank you, Nick.
Mayor, my last question, since I thought I had the floor earlier, I haven't given it up yet.
Go ahead.
Is tamped, Corey, for clarification on this slide, tamped gravel, did I understand you to say that that would not be any better than like concrete or blacktop, and it's not allowed?
No, that would be allowed.
Oh, it is.
Again, if they could show that it was a type of stone that was 2 inches thick. I use the word tamped gravel when I pulled from DENREC's administrative code when they use the word impervious. And they use a section in their code that states impervious structures, and tamped gravel is part of that, as they define it in their code.
Okay, so really what is important is the 2 inches.
That's correct, in that the material itself is comprised of one of these types of materials.
Okay. And I just want to clarify, my goal in asking all these questions is not to restrict anything that residents want to do. It was to try to get a better understanding of what all the choices are that folks could actually make. Because at one time, I think I must have misheard or misunderstood that there were only 3 choices for a driveway. And this list is much more than I had, along with the pictures. That those are legal driveways that I'm looking at. So my goal is not restrictive. My goal is to expand choices. So that's just for clarification. Thank you.
Can I add one thing? I thought you mentioned also clamshells. I know we said no for sidewalks. Could you have them for a driveway?
Well, I think you could, and I would make the case that the natural area we have as a definition in there under natural area, under the restrictions for mulched areas, shall be limited to the use, shall not include, mulched areas shall be limited to the use of vegetative ground covers and shall not include the use of clamshells, decorative stone, or other similar hard materials. And in Chapter 232, Article 6, off-street parking shows hard material. So in doing inferring a judgment call there, natural area clamshells are called out as a hard surface material. They're not explicitly stated in driveways here. So clamshells are not stones, they're shells, and they don't fit the tar and chip concrete, blacktop, brick, tile, or wood. So I would consider them possibly for a hard surface for a sidewalk or a walkway, but not for the driveway due to these lists of materials here. I wouldn't be able to fit the clamshells in with one of these types of materials.
And I guess my question for the stormwater group, as they continue on, is, are clamshells better than choosing blacktop and concrete for runoff? I'm going to guess the answer is yes. So this has been very informative for me of how many choices there really might be if you want to transform concrete and asphalt into something much better for the environment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Did you have something?
Just a question, Corey. I appreciate your knowledge and the way you apply it logically to this, but the purpose of this also is to show what we existing have. Will you at some point come back to us with perhaps suggestions of changes in code that would make this more, I won't say easily understood, but more applicable to today's needs? Because you also mentioned where we have blacktop, brick, tile, wood, and we spoke of mulch, but you also, there is manufactured mulch now. We don't define that, but you pulled that out. So again, I'm just looking to the next steps here. Do you plan on next steps, or are you confident of where we are today with the existing language that exists in our codes?
Well, if the discussion is going to continue on as far as pervious, impervious, and then we also call out hard surface, we don't really know, there's no great way to define the hard surface there either and how that could relate. I would definitely recommend that we work this out a little bit more. Just like Wallace Montgomery pointed out, more general statements like we have here, stone or wood, we have to pull in a lot of interpretations on what that can mean and what that's comprised of.
Or are they still applicable even?
Correct. Mm-hmm. And if that's how that would work out with impervious features of these materials to be used. And I know just one reference to the plumbing code here, because again, it's just movement of water, but flow rate is a big one in the plumbing code. And how you choose the size or the types of different fixtures or equipment is based off of flow rate. And until we have more of a definitive approach to what that flow rate could be on the high end or low end of thresholds, that could be a gray area for us as well moving forward with pervious and impervious.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Corey. Good job. We appreciate it.
Mayor, on the 7th of August, I think I give handouts to everybody on the Minnesota impervious surface, and it defines all the questions that Commissioner Sharp was asking. I think pea gravel is considered not compactable if it will pass through a 200 size sieve, and it's all of it talks about in there. But 2 inches doesn't cut it. It's going to have to be
Well, 2 inches might cut it in our code.
but it's going to have to be a permeable subsurface too, and it's all defined and hundreds of references. It's that little thing with a little square on the front.
I saw that whole
package.
Jay, I'm watching new homes being put in, and they're putting in driveways that I think are much better than asphalt or concrete.
Yes.
And they're not doing all of that infrastructure. But at a minimum, to me, it's better than asphalt and concrete.
Yes.
So it's a simple equation there that if that's what you're looking at, I'd rather have that than the two choices that are definitely able to be approved out of the options, which are asphalt and concrete. I'd rather have something else. So
the mayor sent me a video new, modern, permeable surfaces, tiles, and there are examples of people pouring water through concrete. It's a great little video. I'll send, Francis, if you will send me your email, I'll send that video to you too. It's all, permeable surfaces have changed tremendously in the last 10 years.
That is why I mentioned pervious concrete.
Oh, yeah, that video the mayor sent me shows people pouring a bucket of water through a slab of concrete. It's just astounding.
All righty. So
I'm done.
we've got more to do. With that, we're going to move on to the next item of new business, and that is to discuss a proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 270 zoning section 270-4 and Article VII signs pertaining to definitions for canopy and marquee signs. This is something that is in the new section of business. So Lawrence, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is in response to one of the commissioners' requests to really kind of get a little more fidelity on some definitions. So if you look in the attached proposed ordinance, just for discussion, it removes the word canopy on line 21, and then it goes on in line 25 to put a definition of canopy, a little more meat on the bone there, as well as in line 29, marquee sign. Those will be added within our specific definitions. I think it'll be a little more helpful as we move on. Just brief, and if you go on to line 43, how they will be affixed and applied.
Where do you want me to go?
You're there.
Right there.
You're right there.
Line 43.
Yep.
City Manager, so are both of these definitions already in section
They-
102-6?
This is where they will be placed. So, is it 102.6? If you go to that one, that is the adoption of standards for the International Building Code. So they will be adjusted to that. Our definitions currently don't have these two. 270-56. These will be added.
I guess my question, where's the actual definition? What makes a canopy different than a marquee?
I think what happened there, Commissioners, is in 102-6, this was, if you recall, Evan's been working quite a bit on the canopy and awning ordinance. That does provide definitions, and the idea here is to bring the sign code within the zoning code into consistency with what's now in 102.6. So yeah, the definitions of canopy and marquee signs are in 102.6 is my recollection.
Essentially, the awning is a freestanding unit affixed solely to the front facade of a building. So we kind of know what awnings are there. The canopy, to use an example, seashell shop. It's attached to the front of the facade, but comes out and it needs posts to hold it up, the structural integrity. The marquee sign is essentially like a canopy sign, but it has no legs. It's solely cantilever. The example there would be Mason's Lobster, where it looks like an old movie theater marquee, if you will. It's attached to the building and extends out, but there are no visible means of support other than back at the building.
I understand there's a difference, and I understand that we're adding definitions here, but I'm saying that the definitions are not actually adequate. They're not defining what is different between a canopy and a marquee, as you just described what makes them different.
Right, so the definitions in 106 or 102.6, here they are. So an awning is a detachable roof-like structure supported entirely by the exterior wall of a building without posts, and which consists of a rigid frame covered with fabric, plastic, or metal and extends over doors and/or windows for the purpose of providing protection from the elements and/or providing embellishment of the facade. This definition includes retractable awnings and architectural projections that are wholly supported by the building to which it is attached. Then the definition of canopy is a rigid roof-like structure other than an awning or marquee made of fabric, metal, or other materials that is supported through connection to the building as well as by columns or posts affixed to the ground. So the ordinance that's being proposed today is basically, if it's a canopy sign, it's a sign on a canopy as defined in 1026. If it's a marquee
It's
sign.
referencing back to where the definition actually is. Okay.
Right.
This actually just states it, adds it to 270, which is our zoning code. So in that line, it doesn't, they don't exist in our definitions. This adds them to that one and references back to 1026.
Okay. That makes sense.
Sorry, I should have been more clear. My apologies.
It's okay.
One, this was my request, and it meets it with it, but also the additional other things in there is the sign requirements chart or per zoning code district. So the canopy and marquee signs need to be added to that list of, it's in
Sign,
270 attachment 2, City of Rehoboth Beach site requirements per zoning code district. So
attachment number,
It-
chapter
again, it's just-
270, attachment number 2.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. They just need to be, that needs to be updated also.
We need to update that. It avoids, it does have awning, but it avoids or omits canopy, and it omits
Yeah.
marquee. Okay. With that, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this awning thing? If not, then we'll bring it back to the commissioners. If it's okay with you, I would like to put this on for consideration of a vote at our September regular meeting. Is that all right? So,
Works for me.
so be it. Thank you. Did you have something for awnings?
I do. I just have a quick comment.
Yes.
My name's Joanne. I work in building and licensing, and specifically signs are kind of my forte. So there's going to be some more stability and information needed for, I think, the final version of this ordinance. We're going to have, if you can imagine, the black wall hitch sign. It's going to be out into city property and what we're going to do in terms of how they attach them and how safely they attach them, and if they have a lease with city property when they're going out into city property, what the requirements are for the structure, that sort of thing. So, for example, when I ask for an awning sign, when someone applies for an awning sign, I'm asking for things like flame spread. I need the spec sheet on the flame spread because it's going on a commercial building, and that's a requirement of the international code. So there are some details and some structural pieces here that maybe are need further discussion, in my opinion. And I just wanted to say that.
So I need help understanding then. Is there, this is then not ready, we need to modify it? Because the things that I just heard you say, Joanne, flame spread and all those things, were in a previous version of the awnings. I don't know whether that's where we,
From my understanding, those are covered under the commercial building code. Right, those specific aspects that are called out are in the commercial building code for signs, marquees, and awnings. And our specific parameters for installation, manufacturer, attachment, those are all governed under international codes that we have adopted. So I'm not sure, I understand there may be some individual miscommunication about this one, but this is truly just updating the two definitions, the zoning ordinance that is under, and referencing back to the code that it's going to go under.
Right.
The aspects that you're referencing are governed under a separate section.
So the reason I'm here and is that the limited amount of information, I think that is here, will cause some difficulty in enforcing the code unless we get some more specifics, like can go into city property to this amount.
That's covered under a license agreement, a separate thing altogether that I think
Is
that
there a
probably should have been brought up to the building and licensing department head and navigated that way. I mean, I think that
So we will have a licensing agreement.
yes, if it's over public space, there will be a license agreement.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you confer with her and let us know
Yes.
if we do need to modify.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. With that, we're going to move to the next item of new business, which is to discuss possible award of contract for the LED retrofit project on Rehoboth Avenue. Kevin, looks like you're going to take the lead.
And if you could get me, there we go. Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I've got a couple of recommendations for bid awards here this afternoon. First of which is the conversion of the LED, or conversion to LED of the lights that run down the median of Rehoboth Avenue. You can kind of see the cross-section there of what the new, the scope of work is. It's the light fixture itself, the support arms, and then the bracket that attaches it to the light pole itself. There are 33 doubles like this, and then there are 4 single armed lights as well. So that's the scope of work. Our engineer's estimate was a little over $90,000. We got 2 good bids from contractors we've worked with extensively in the not too distant past. BW Electric, who's done a lot of electric work for us down at the wastewater treatment plant. Also did a lot of work here, I think. And then Apple Electric, who also does a lot of work for us in various various parts of town. One at $83,450, and then Apple at $98,000.
Kevin, I'm sorry, would you go back to the first slide real quick? The picture on the right is showing the existing yard arm and light fixture.
Correct, that's correct.
So essentially, the new LED ones are essentially the very same design.
Correct.
Right? And I think I brought it up before. My biggest concern when we start changing light fixtures is that the color range is the same. And do you know that the color range for the new LEDs will be a match for the existing color range?
Well, all the median lights will be replaced, so they'll all match. It will not match the color of the lights in the sidewalk, what I call the sidewalk lights, because they're not LED. So there is a slight difference in that coloration until, we swap those out to LED as well, which is in the, I think, next year in the CIP.
But they'll match the existing, the replacements will match the existing ones.
Fixtures will match. The light itself will not. Because we recently...
If we knew that the color temperature of the existing lights was 3,000, which is a warm white, and the new ones were a 2,000 and a bright white, I would have concern about that.
So it is the color
change in color.
it is the color temperature that the board codified a year ago. I think it's 3,000 degree Kelvin. That's the color temperature that we specified for these fixtures.
And you think that matches, the 3,000 matches what we have in the median?
I honestly don't know what the current
Okay.
bulb temperature is in the median.
Was that during the original streetscapes?
Yeah. It's just, I just know from experience when you start changing the color temperature of the lights, that precipitates complaints. All of a sudden, they're shining in my window differently, and that's quite a drastic change. If they went from a warm white to a bright white, look at car light. Have you ever seen car lights that are warm white, and then some are halogen? They're that absolutely bright white. It's quite a shocker, the difference colors. So that would be my only comment that I would
We
have.
specified in the documents what the board had directed us to include in all of the new lighting projects throughout town. So that's what we did here.
Anybody else?
300 3,000 degree Kelvin, I believe it is.
Yeah. Didn't we say that we wanted to make our lights dark sky compatible as much as we could? And I expect that's probably what they did.
Dark sky like, and
Yeah,
I think
dark sky
that
like.
achieves it because it has that globe.
Yep, I think you're right. I
over
think
top.
I think that really does go along with that.
Anybody, any members of the public? No? Very, very good.
Just a quick question. Kevin, when they start this project, do we need to coordinate with Main Street at all? Will the banners be affected on those poles at all?
It probably won't affect the banners themselves because they'll be, working above that.
Okay.
So it would be a unique opportunity to take advantage of them having the pole trucks out there if there's some banners that are missing or we need some assistance from BW to put those banners back.
Thank you.
Be a good time.
Commissioner Sharp?
Just a quick question. I'm not sure if you already told us one time before, but if you did, refresh my memory. It'll cost us around 83,000+ to do this for the conversion. And what's the return on investment?
Well, I don't know that, Commissioner.
Oh,
Other than we know that LEDs are more efficient than
right.
typical.
Will we know it, Kevin, at some point, I guess? Or
I'm
maybe
sure
we won't even track that?
We can certainly try to, we could do an engineering estimate and say, okay, LEDs are much more, this percent more efficient. We could come up with anecdotal, well, it wouldn't be anecdotal. We'd actually have a calculation of what it would probably be.
If we have that at some point, that'd be great to know. I just
Okay.
don't know for my own edification. I don't know what the trade-off is. I know it's a good thing to do. It's a right thing to do. I have no problem doing it, but I don't know what it actually saves us.
And we may be able to track, meter usage. I
Sure.
don't know if they're all on X number of meters where we could just see, okay, here's what we've spent for electricity on those poles for the last couple of years, and then look forward to tracking it going ahead with the LEDs.
One of the biggest cost savings is just going to be replacement bulbs. You don't have to replace LEDs as often as other bulbs, and we're usually spending 10 grand a month on street aid expenditures, which is mostly lighting, correct?
A lot of it is, you're right, Commissioner.
We could put a meter on a pole and then multiply it times the number of poles and get an idea. I think the real savings is power.
Okay, I've already moved on, so if y'all want to go forward, I'm good.
One clarification, this is for labor, materials we've already purchased and they're in place.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's correct.
All right, so we'll put
So the
that-
requested board action would be at our next meeting is then we'll bring it up for a vote to award to BW Electric in that amount of $83,450.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have, on this topic? Come forward, please.
Good afternoon, Walter Birmingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. In the past, when we looked at changing lights, we were dealing with high and low pressure sodium. And one of the problems was the best light was low pressure sodium, but it made women's lipstick, et cetera, look black. And it was going to make appearance on people walking down Rehoboth Avenue. I remember when this first came up, and the LED, without question, is much, much more efficient. And at some point there, Kevin, I remember seeing the efficiency ratings that were compared with high pressure sodium and metal halide. Somewhere in the middle of this, it got lost, which is not a problem. And it's a good question that the mayor asked, as long as previously the board had passed some type of instructions or a policy to come to a standard for something down around 3,000 will be a much cooler light. You definitely don't want up around 5,000 because the glare is terrible. But what you're proposing, I think, is probably the closest you get. The one thing I don't understand, and I wasn't just throwing this in, I understand they are remote control.
They are remote
Okay, you
controlled.
might explain that to the board if you don't know, because I don't know. Is that for color or for some other
Intensity,
purpose?
so you can dim, raise to a certain level. So if an area is too bright at a certain time, we can control various sections.
And then my only other question, and as I stand there and just thinking about it, is it reasonable then that probably they have a warranty period? Are we going to end up with a new person to take care of the lights? Well,
Yeah, I'm not
right
getting the
now it's
question.
Apple, and they do it with their bucket truck, and I have no loyalty to anybody there. But possibility then, are we talking about a guaranteed first-year maintenance on those lights warranty?
There would have the one-year warranty for sure. I don't know that we'd want to enter into a kind of a
Yeah, I wasn't-
long-term maintenance agreement.
But I would think then that the first year where they are, that probably the company that would install them, whatever that warranty period is, we might have a different person or entity working on them. But other than that, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go into the next item of new business, discuss possible award of contract for the annual water meter replacement program. Kevin?
Thanks again, Mayor. Another contract that we opened bids on last week is for the FY24 meter replacement contract. You can see on the image on the right, kind of a rough outline of the section of town that we're primarily going to be working under. We had our typical two that we've had over the last probably 4 years, bidders, Harry Caswell Inc. and RNC Contractors, both of which have done the job before and have done really good work for us each of the times they've had the contract. We had a third bidder this year, JJID, which once we opened the bids, we realized they had a big misunderstanding of the scope of work. I mean, they were on the order of 10 times what the other contractors were. So we called them, just said, hey, are you aware? And then they said, well, we didn't really understand the scope. So they basically withdrew their bid at that point just because it was so out of line. So we had two bids. They kind of bracketed on our engineer's estimate. Caswell at $77,017.50, and then RNC a little bit high this year at $128,000. But our recommendation would be at the next board meeting of this to award the contract to Harry Caswell and their bid amount of $77,017.50. And just as a reminder, it's a unit price item for the installation of these meters. It really, the number of meters we will do will revolve around how many meters we're physically able to get, because they are still a supply chain problem on the meters. So Robert's been stockpiling them over the year, so we have a good supply on hand. Whether we can do, all 400 or so may not be feasible, but we'll do as many as we can based upon the availability of the meters that come in.
But Kevin, the bid is for 400?
I think 450
Ish.
some.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Do you know the cost of the meter itself, approximately?
In the neighborhood of $2,500 by the time you get the yoke and all the little pieces that go with it. And we buy those, we've ordered them, a year ago because of the supply chain issues. So depending upon how many come in, then how many we'll be able to install.
Any questions from the commissioners?
No.
Any questions from the public or comment? If not, Kevin, we'll put that on the September regular meeting for consideration. We appreciate it. Thank you for your work. With that, we'll move right on to commissioner announcements, comments. Does anybody have anything? If not, we'll move on to review future meeting dates. 2:00 today, we'll be back in this room for a special meeting. Sole agenda topic is to go into executive session. I don't expect any action to come from that meeting. So in other words, we should not be taking, or will likely not be taking any votes when we come back into public session today. The next meeting after that is Friday, September 15th, 2:00. That is the regular Board of Commissioners meeting where we swear in the new officers and start anew, if you will. With that, I think, I just lost my sheet.
Mayor, could I make a
Yes.
comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to commend the city manager and much of the city staff. You know, on Sunday, we had that horrific and tragic event that took place, and I happened to be there and witness most of it. And the beach patrol they were already dismissed and heading home, and once the 911 call came in, 30 of those young men and women ran out to take control of the situation and conduct a search and rescue. And to stand there and witness what was a tragic and scary event, the level of professionalism and the dedication and the seamless coordination with Chuck Snyder, DENREC, the Coast Guard, the police department was seamless. And I was proud to witness how dedicated our city staff and the volunteers were. And I just want you, city manager, to know that, and please thank everyone on behalf of all of us.
Thank you for offering that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I sure will. I mean, those events are tragic. We've already had some feedback that, you know, incident response and critical response counseling will be in order for some of our beach patrol. They are young, impressionable, and they just went through a tragic event. And I've already spoken with Chief on this one to make sure some of that counseling is available. They actually found one of those beach patrol very emotional later that night. So we need to make sure we reach out, give them a hug, and give them the help and the counseling they need. But thank you for that. I will pass those accolades on.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to citizen comment. Walter?
Ditto to both of your comments, and fantastic coverage on television, reflected very well in Rehoboth for the staff that went out there and did the job. Generality speaking, we have an agenda, Walter Birmingham, 123 Hanopen Avenue. Generality speaking, we get reports, and Mr. City Manager, I think it was about 8 weeks ago, there was a comment made by you, I don't know where it was intended to go, that the city manager's report would come out in writing. I don't know whether that was to go to you, the commissioners, or that the public might have a comment, and you're giving pretty good reports. But we have a sewer plant out there, State Road lift station, and a life-saving or lifeguard facility, and nothing appears as a bullet item or in your reports on how these projects are working. And if you all are getting this privately, I think maybe the public would like some of it. We have a new digital communication that's out there, and I glanced at it and I stopped. Not to be sarcastic, but when I got to Rehoboth, Maryland, and after listening to Commissioner Sharp's comment at, I think, the last meeting or once before, you have to go looking all over. And then we had a list of all these things from the mediums by which we can find out what's going on. So I don't know why we're advertising Rehoboth, Maryland, and real estate in Rehoboth, Maryland early on this latest release that we put out a week or so ago. Does that make sense, Mr. City Manager? I'm not being critical. What's the new medium you just put out?
Reach
Out Rehoboth.
I don't know why we're advertising other places when the people of Rehoboth need to be able to know what's going on. And my last comment,
Mr. Birmingham, I'm confused. Can you elaborate? I want to track your language so I understand better. What are you referencing? So
I don't know why about Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, what that's got to do with one of the things on that new medium is Rehoboth, Maryland. There is a Rehoboth, Maryland. And then another subject is real estate in Rehoboth, Maryland, if I got that right. So if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I just...
Reach Out Rehoboth?
Yes, thank you. Okay, before you...
No, we'll take a look at it. I was, if something's wrong on there,
Oh.
we'll get it fixed. I was not tracking
If
that.
everybody's going to be reading their tube right now, I'll stop talking.
Nope, go ahead.
No, I'd like you to go ahead.
I don't see it, so.
Well, I'll see if I can call it back up. Last item, Mr. Mayor, if you would allow the minutes to reflect the passing of Richard Derrickson, a former commissioner and a businessman who served our community in the area with honor and dignity. Rehoboth Beach was well served by his willingness to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Anybody else? And we'll call this meeting closed at 12:24 p.m. Thank you very much.